the Jews JFK.
Once you can control the weather. There are so many of these Ben Shapiro types. When Candace was taking the gloves off with black people, they were all like, yeah. But then it's like, in this situation, where the state of Israel has just been like mass slaughtering these captive people. But as soon as you take the gloves off with them, it's like, all of a sudden Ben Shapiro's the woke.
Basically, Trump's going, wow, they tried to take me out. And now he's like, holy shit, it is that easy to take me out. I barely survived this one. They will try it again. I better behave.
That seems to be the only explanation that makes sense to me. There's an obvious blueprint for Donald Trump that Donald Trump would always follow, and he's not following it. Trump shook. You know, I really feel like the Democrats deserve to lose, and then I see Trump.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Flagrant. This week has been quite entertaining on Twitter. The discourse online has been, maybe I shouldn't say that, entertaining. I gotta find the right words.
What do you mean entertaining?
Yeah, it's terrifying. Engaging for sure.
I think the perfect explanation of
We have Dave
Twitter.
Smith here, by the way, to
What's up, Dave
to make
Smith?
sense of this all.
Dave Smith,
Okay,
what's up?
we need America's sweetheart, dad of two, stand-up comedian, political pundit, and now endorsed by Joe Rogan as the man to go to for political discourse.
I don't know exactly what he said, but it was something like genius of our time. Everything he says is true. Something along those lines. I don't remember verbatim, but I really think you just encapsulated the whole thing by just going, all right, so the discourse on Twitter has been, wait a minute, this is offensive.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, this is how do you even say this?
I mean, you can't stop looking at it.
Yeah.
It's just the second I open it up, I'm like, the Jews did everything? Everything?
The good with the bad. You know what I mean?
The JFK thing, I had no clue.
Yeah, apparently they did that.
They did that. What else did they do? 9/11, apparently.
But they made a polio vaccine, so it's like, it comes down the wash.
Vaccines, though.
They made now we're back. Back.
Fuck.
Okay. That traditionally would have been the thing that everyone would go, yeah, polio vaccine. But now everybody's like, does it give you polio? I don't
Most
know
of us had
anymore.
natural immunity. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Yeah.
Dave, can you make a little bit of sense of that? You were on. Well, actually, can you say how this all started percolating? What this last week? I think we saw it, reach a zenith, as Akash would say.
Well, with the Candace stuff specifically, I mean, she has really touched a nerve.
Let me tell you something. I'm terrified of Candace. I hope that she does not fixate at all, have a fixation with me at any point in time. And if she does, I apologize because she will not let it go.
Have you met her? Do you know Candace?
No.
She's like the sweetest lady. Like you meet her, she's just like a total sweetheart. It's very weird though.
Black people are happy she got her eyes off of us right now.
Talk about the Jews.
Oh, she'll be back. I know. Take it. Enjoy your moment while she's focused on us. But
This is a
she'll be
layover.
coming back around.
No, she's Thanos, bro. Like, she does not play. She will read every book.
Well,
then
she's very smart and she dives deep into things and she's diving right now into some wild conspiracies that I don't really know. Like, I don't know enough about whether she's right or wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is something that I gotta say to the thing you're alluding to there. It's like, there are so many of these conservative types, the Ben Shapiro types, who, when Candace was taking the gloves off with black people, they were all like, get up. You know what I mean? And like, and look, it's okay to take the gloves off with all groups of people sometimes. Sometimes you need tough love. But when she was like, and Ben Shapiro himself will take the gloves off with black people and be oh, listen, you want to know why you have this? Because you're committing too much crimes. You're committing too much crimes. How about you stay married? How about you don't have kids out of wedlock? How about this?
Good point.
But as soon as what I'm trying to say is,
broken clock is right.
So he was nailing it. And then, but then it's like, if you direct any of that energy toward Jewish people, and again, all of these things are like, the problem is like when you speak in terms of collectives, you always get everything wrong. Because if you're talking to the black community and you're like, hey, black people, you need to take care of your kids. There's like some black dad who's a great dad who's like, who are you talking to? Right? Like, I do take care
Also,
of my
they
kids.
know.
Right.
There's no black people. Wait, we got to take care of them?
Yeah, right.
Thank God this fucking little hat guy told us we got to take care of them.
Yeah, like the black guy who's not taking care of his kids is like, I know I'm supposed to. I don't want to. But so like,
You have black kids.
Yeah, I said I was getting milk on purpose. I needed an alibi.
They're easy when there's these little Jewish because they don't run as fast, but these black ones will fall.
that's the greatest comeback. He goes, yeah, it's easy when they're little white kids. Sure, I take care of them. But like again, like look, but what Ben Shapiro would say to that, right, is like, okay, but I'm not talking to those people, but we're talking about statistics here, and it's like, okay, fine, but look, then in this situation where for the last 10 months the state of Israel has just been like mass slaughtering these captive people in the most horrific way. But as soon as you take the gloves off with them, it's like, all of a sudden Ben Shapiro's the woke. All of a sudden, he's the same thing that he's been railing against the whole time. I'm offended. Safe space on college campus and all that. So I'm so
Facts
disgusted.
don't care about your feelings.
Yeah,
All
that
of a sudden
guy.
they do.
All Mr. Free Speech and all. So I'm so disgusted with that. And I think what Israel's doing is totally wrong. But then, of course, with all these things, there are excesses on the, anti-Israel side. And I do see that all over Twitter, too.
I mean,
in my replies, people who are trying to back me up. First of all, I'm Jewish, so I'm probably not going to love. I'm probably not going to love your gas all the Jews comment. and then second of all,
you didn't like DEF CON 3 on the Jews?
You're like, but then you're
one of the good ones. Yeah.
Which, like, listen, if it ever goes down, I'll take it. But for now, I don't need it. But then it's like. You're also like, do you think you're helping me?
Yeah.
Like, do you think you're helping the argument right now?
Yeah.
Because no, you're making us all look terrible.
I think
like,
what you do well, and I think what anybody who's actually pro-Palestine, should do is really stamp out anti-Semitism. Be like, yo, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Israel and Jewish people are different things. I don't support what Israel's doing. Jewish people, no issue with you. It's a government.
100%. Especially because that's the tactic of all the pro-Israeli people. So you're almost embracing their whole thing was that they go, oh, you're criticizing Netanyahu? Well, that's because you hate Jews.
Yeah.
And then it's like, so if you hand them that also, you're falling right into their trap. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's always the same with all these like weird, there's always like these kind of movements that seem like they're enemies, but they weirdly help each other. So like something like Charlottesville was like the best thing for MSNBC. Because they're like, yes, perfect. See, these are the Trump supporters. Even though it was like 200 people, it wasn't that wasn't the 63 million people who voted for Trump. But so it's weirdly where like if you become the neo-Nazi, all you're doing really is helping the progressive woke guy because you're proving their point that you're either us or you're a neo-Nazi. Whereas like all sane people should be like, there's some room in between those two.
100%. That's a great point. So the rampant anti-Semitism completely discredits any logical and fair criticisms of Israel and what's happening right now.
It's not. I wouldn't say it discredits it, but it allows a pro-Israel voice to say. It allows them to go, well, look at all this.
And you can't disagree with them because when I'm on Twitter, I'm like, it seems like they.
It's really hard. It's really hard to know exactly what's going on with all of that stuff because in social media it's almost always accounts without like a real name on them. I'm like, is this a 14-year-old trolling? Is this somebody, is it a 14-year-old whose stepdad just beat the crap out of him or something, or is this like a real deal, like I have been reading Mein Kampf and I agree with
foreign government that's paying for it? And
is it our own government?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they love this stuff.
I mean, they could.
Wait. Sorry to interrupt. So break that down. I've heard the foreign government thing. I thought this was really interesting. So anytime there's like dissension within America, it behooves our enemies to stoke as much of that as possible, right? So they could just put the juice on it. You can buy ads, you can inflate tweets, you can do whatever you want to continue that discourse that is incredibly, let's say, toxic or problematic. Why would our own government do it?
Well, because you already said our enemies are doing it. And that's our biggest enemies are in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, well, look, think about it like this, right?
Or how would it benefit them, I guess?
Well, I'd just say, first of all, have our own political leaders and our own corporate media, have they not been stoking all these divisions all these years? I mean, like, they push it more than anybody. I mean, it's like, since basically for the last like 12 years, there has been like a tsunami of just pushing the most divisive issues from all, and you know, I've talked about this many times before, but do you ever see those charts, like the Nexus charts, where they track words that are used in the big corporate media outlets, and it'll track words like, like mentions of the word racism in the New York Times, mentions of the word transgenderism or toxic masculinity, all these things.
Like
but it's all at 2011, 2012. It's like, and then it skyrockets up. All of them in unison, all just started doing it.
Like election time.
Well, it was
specific about.
Well, it was on the heels of the Occupy Wall Street movement and the Tea Party movement, and like all these, you know, kind of, you got a bunch of leftists standing outside the big banks screaming, "We are the 99%." And then all of a sudden, the entire corporate media and the entire political class decided, what we want to talk about is transgender bathrooms, because that is the burning issue of the day. And it pits right-wingers and left-wingers against each other, fighting over something that is no threat to power whatsoever.
So once there's class unity.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing.
Okay, slow down. So there is the Occupy Wall Street is this movement that right wing and left wing can get behind.
It was certainly more left wing than right wing, but the message of it was, we are the 99%.
And we're getting robbed by the...
And we're getting robbed by the... And they didn't even really mean 99%. They meant like 99.9%. They were like, it's the people who own banks against the rest of us.
And the fear of that becoming trendy, that catching on, and there being a unified front against these banks, or these people in power, makes them reposition the conversation to something that, one, those liberals that are out there have to support. They have to support the pro-transgender argument because if they don't, then they're going to look bigoted. Oh, wow, it's like the perfect foil.
Dude, they're such geniuses. Listen, they found the perfect thing that, first of all, just like you said, any left liberal type can't be against, because your whole identity is that you're the non-bigoted ones, right? So you can't be against anything that might make you bigoted.
At the edge of the building, and you're just like, okay, trannies can go to the peak.
Right. and on top of that, right, it's that you found the thing, particularly with the transgender thing, that will make a right-winger's blood boil.
Oh, so now the same group that were about to come together are going to start fighting again.
Wow.
And where do these conversations happen? Does this happen organically and then they put a little bit more gas on it? Or is there like a think tank in the Pentagon that's I
can't say this for sure. I think this was a straight CIA op. That's my guess. And which, by the way, there were commercials for the CIA bragging about how they hire indigenous women of color with anxiety issues and all this stuff. And they all started pumping it out. And particularly because, look, I mean, you see how much they've just bought off the left. There's freaking Bank of America floats at the Gay Pride Parade. These guys are riding down on a big bank float.
Wow.
And it was the ultimate, think about the deal from the bank's perspective, where they went, okay, you're mad because we just wrecked the economy and then got bailed out by the taxpayers. So here's our deal. We will send all of our white executives to diversity training. Are we good now? Is that a fair deal? And keep looting the American people, keep raking in record high profits, but we'll focus on all this stuff. And I think that basically it's just that the elite, the ruling elite, failed so much on every policy that eventually that people were waking up. And you know, when you had I think there was something, you had the Tea Party movement and the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Can you describe the Tea Party movement?
Well, the Tea Party was it's like around 2010, I think it started, and it started from the Ron Paul campaigns and in opposition to the banker bailouts. But it was all against like record government spending,
but
debt.
The way it was positioned
was
a bunch of
racist.
Oh yeah, right away, of course, because
I had no clue that's what they were pissed off about government spending.
That was the whole thing.
Did you know that?
I know government spending was the main one, but they quickly got positioned as like, oh, that's the racist guys. Like, stay away from those.
These are the same racists who ended up voting for Trump.
Yeah.
In my brain, it's
Well,
the guy
that's-
who doesn't. I'm not plugged in. That's what I thought it was.
Life tour update. San Antonio, we had his second show. Las Vegas, same weekend as USC Sphere. Come out there for both. Then we got Cleveland, Columbus, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Denver. We added a third show. Cincinnati, we added a second show. Rama, Ontario, Salt Lake City, we added a second show. Reno, Nevada, we added a second show. San Jose, we had a second show. Portland, and then finally closing it out in Honolulu, Hawaii. TheAndrewSchultz.com for tickets. We'll see you guys there. Peace.
All right, guys. September 6th and 7th, I'm going to be at Wise Guys Comedy Club in Las Vegas. I'm excited to do Vegas. And that, what a run of fun cities after that. I'm going to be in Miami, Doral, Florida, technically, September 12th through 14th. Get your tickets. I'm going to be at the Improv. September 19th through 21st, I'm going to be in Timonium, so the Fun Cities tour ends, but I'm going to be at Magoobies, which is a great comedy club. September 27th and 28th, Greensville. October 17th through 19th, New Brunswick, New Jersey. There's plenty of dates. Go to akashsingh.com to check all of those out. Thank you guys so much. Let's get back to the show.
Well, listen, and look, this is like what always happens, though. They always try to like infiltrate these movements and push them into cultural issues. This is what happened back with the right wingers back in like the '60s, where they would come in and like the New Republic. Or I'm sorry, not New Republic, National Review and William F. Buckley and these guys, they'd come in and like, so the old right, the old right with pre-World War II were always like non-interventionists. They didn't want to fight wars. They believed in immigration restrictions, trade restrictions, and sound money, like no fiat currency. These are like the things they cared about. And then National Review came in and they were like, you know what it really means to be a conservative? We're against the homos. Okay? These homos are everywhere, and we have to oppose these homos. By the way, we're not going to do the whole sound money thing anymore. We're going to have a fiat currency, and we're going to fight a lot of wars. But these homos, man, these homos are all over the place,
That's
and
the problem,
they're always kind of like throwing you off of the issues of substance that actually matter. And they're just kind of like, okay, well, you know how you guys were against entangling alliances and adventurism overseas? Well, we got a war in Vietnam to fight, so we're not doing that stuff anymore. But you should really worry about, whatever.
And it's
dumb
always
thing is.
adjacent to Christianity, an issue that is religious that will overtake any government care that I have. If you attach it to my Christianity is against homosexuality, you gonna let that happen in this country?
Right.
This is a Christian
Yeah,
country.
because it has to be something that is part of your core identity.
Yeah.
If it's not that important to you, you're not going to latch on. Right. Wow. It's actually, you feel guilty not latching on. You feel guilty not having a voice about it.
And I feel it myself, like you guys know me for a long time. Like I'm totally obsessed with all of these issues of like war and money and banking and all like government corruption. But I'll be the first to see like a libs at TikTok video on Twitter and I'm like, ooh, what are they doing to these kids? What's wrong with this? Get that tranny away from those kids. You can't have that. Like it's just, it pulls at something deep inside. And by the way, I don't think they should be bringing this stuff to kids. I think that's really
But to
crazy.
your point, that's probably 5 times that's happening in America.
Well, you have no sense. The thing is, you have no sense of it. You're like, oh, okay. So, I mean, like, my kids don't go to public school, and I haven't been to a public school since I was in public school. Yeah. So I don't know. I see the video of this. Is this 1 out of 100,000 teachers are like this? Is it 1 out of 1,000? Yeah. I have no sense of proportion. Yeah. But I know there's a video there that'll get my blood boiling. Right. But I'm not even saying some of the distractions are important issues, right? But like even like a fight over like say abortion or something like that, which is a very important issue depending on how you see it.
Again, adjacent to religion though.
But it also plays on the religious thing, but it's also like it's not a threat to anyone in power. Like no one in power is threatened by whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. Really but if you're like, hey, I think these big banks shouldn't get bailed out anymore. Or like, hey, I don't think we should fight these wars that these weapons companies are making hundreds of billions of dollars off of. That is a threat to their bottom line. I mean, these rich people are going to get their abortions, is my point.
Yeah,
they're going to find a way. They're gonna...
How can they be so proficient at like distracting and stoking the culture war and so seemingly inefficient at everything else? Like, which government is doing it? We talk nonstop about how inefficient government is, but the way that you've described it, they've masterfully manipulated us for the last, 30 decades, 40, 50?
I would think they're efficient at getting
I think
bans.
they're very efficient. I think the government is inefficient model is based off of a faulty assumption. So when people say government's inefficient, it's almost like, well, look, they took over healthcare, but they're not delivering good healthcare at a reasonable price. And you're like, go look at Obamacare. The profits for the giant insurance companies
They're
skyrocketed.
efficient, just not
They're
for us.
incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
You're assuming
For the people
that
they
their
serve.
stated goal is their actual
Guys are
goal.
fucking- yeah.
This
And
is
they're-
interesting.
They're the most efficient. Like, what were the Nazis efficient at killing Jews? I mean, there's nothing more efficient than
Yeah.
government. It's just always for evil.
Yeah.
So that's
Do you think
mean,
they've
yeah.
lost control of the psy-op?
yeah. I think.
What does that mean, Mark?
Like, if you're suggesting, which I'm with you here, is that like this is effectively a CIA operation to create a culture war to distract from like the actual class struggle? Have they lost control over that? And you get things like January 6th, and you get things where it's like we're on the brink of civil
Because
war.
of new media, because
No,
of
I
our
didn't mean to
Great
push this
question.
pillow onto you, by the way. This is just now.
Use
This is
it to
like we're
prop
getting
your
like
back
on
up.
He
this
made a
pillow, like,
partition.
really,
Tweeted
like,
it immediately.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Mark.
Good question, bro. So I think like both things are happening. Like, so I would look at it and say they were incredibly effective at, if I'm right and their goal was to start a culture war, you'd look back and go, wow, they did a really good job.
Really
there.
good.
At the same time, I think what's gotten away from them, and this is one of the crazy things that we're like living through this moment right now, is that for the first time, the state has lost the monopoly on the flow of information, which is always the most important thing for them to control.
yeah.
Always. I mean, look, if you think about like what the government really is, which essentially is the gang that rules the land.
The monopoly
Like
of violence.
The monopoly, well, the monopoly of legal violence, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like there's, or I should say more specifically, the monopoly on legal aggression. Because you can commit violence in self-defense. I mean, depending on what state you're in, there's different rules for it. But you can't initiate violence against other people.
Right.
But the state can.
Yeah.
And that's what they have. But then they monopolize certain services, right? But there's a reason why, like, why is it that governments just happen to run like the schools and the post office and the TV channels
post
and
office-
the radios? Well,
Radio makes sense, TV makes sense, school makes sense, right? Because you can push propaganda. And I remember we were having a conversation. It was actually over the stand. You're like, yeah, why do you think they run the post office? I go, well, I don't know. Who would want, I don't know. And you're like, well, how do you get the information around?
Yeah,
There
well,
was a
at the
time
time,
that was the
it.
only way to get the information
That's
around.
right.
So you better fucking control it.
Well, why is it that? But government's never been like, we need to have a monopoly on shoes. we need to make shoes because everyone needs shoes. It's like actually a really basic
Black
need.
people would revolt. So you got not wearing these trash sneakers.
Because we need shoes.
These shoes don't match my hat.
No, but the reason is
Trump ones was kind of fun.
no, but the reason is because we need shoes.
Right.
They don't need us
yeah.
to have shoes.
Yeah, that exactly. And it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's not. So what's
Doesn't
happened,
benefit their control in any way.
Yeah.
But now,
yeah.
and this really is a very new thing.
It's interesting.
Is that they're like I mean, look, you see how much they freaked out about Elon Musk buying Twitter. Like, why would it really matter to these
freaked out
people?
about
Like,
that?
just like all the political pundits, all the corporate media, they were nuts over Elon Musk buying Twitter when he said he's going to make it a free speech platform.
Real quick, do you think that these politicians are useful idiots? Some of them aware, some of them unaware, all of them aware? Like, I'm trying to get an understanding. Like, do you think the second people enter government, there's a conversation where it's like, hey, this is the agenda and this is what we're going to do? Or do you think they just kind of fall in line and then get nudged in the right direction?
I think it's more of the latter. Like it's like it depends on what like level kind of you're at. I think that like for someone who's like a freshman congressman, no, they just enter and then someone kind of explains to them. They've already got the system locked down. It's like, listen, leadership is gonna put a bill forward. You can either vote for it or against it. You can't amend anything that's in it. But if you vote against it when leadership wants you to, you're never gonna get put on any committees. You're never gonna rise up the ranks. You're never gonna like now, the head of the Senate Arms Committee, that dude's talking to the CIA and what I mean? Or if he's not, then look, Dianne Feinstein, who was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee at the time, she came out, she was actually furious about this, but they caught that the CIA was spying on her. And so like, she's tasked with oversight of the intelligence communities, but they're spying on her. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, if there's one person you need to spy on, I would say it's the person who's tasked with the oversight of the committee.
yeah, I mean, that would be one of your first
Right?
things
Like,
you're going to spy on.
Because what if they're
sure.
a fucking Russian spy or something like that? I think you got to lock in that way. I like that.
Well, look, I mean,
Good for her catching it, though.
Well,
she's shrewd.
I don't think
bitch.
she's the one who caught it. Someone else. It came out somehow. I can't remember.
Okay, but
the point is that there's the real point is that our elected representatives are not who's actually running the government.
I think you're also assuming they have good intentions of making sure she's not a spy. I think
No, they got proxy
probably
wars to start.
nefarious intentions of we need something
Don't
to
get in the
blackmail
way.
her with.
Don't get in the way, lady.
I gotta hold this over her head when we need to push our shit through because you don't want me to expose this about you, do you?
Yeah.
That's what I think we would all kind of agree it probably is.
Fuck. Okay, so one thing that I've always been very, if I can't compliment you for a second, I think a lot of times the people that get, what would you call this now? I don't want to even call it red pill because I feel like that's too like niche. But what do you call when you wake up? What is the term that people use?
Red pill used to be our term, but then now it means arguing with 7 club hoes. So
But bitches
I
be
guess
shopping.
we can't use that one anymore.
What is the new one?
So don't marry a porn star, guys. That's my takeaway. That was something I thought we just knew in high school, but I guess that's got to be settled on a lot of different podcasts. But I don't know. Yeah, whatever it is, like just I don't know that we have like the perfect term, but whoever kind of the dissidents are that just like see this whole system as like just totally corrupt and fake. And that's kind of why I liked the red pill analogy, because it was a great analogy from The Matrix. That's like, you take this and you realize that everything is like this carefully constructed illusion that is constructed by bad people who don't have your best interest at heart, you know? So
one thing I think you've done really well is I think you've managed your like emotional state. I think a lot of people that go down this rabbit hole, they get incredibly anxious.
That's a great point.
They're miserable, and it's hard to not be miserable when you start seeing all these institutions that are potentially lying to you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, and I want to go back into more of what's going on, but I'm just curious, like, how often are you checking in with yourself so you don't become one of these people who they kind of go crazy?
Yeah, well, 100%. And I've seen so much of that. And I do sometimes kind of sympathize with those guys, because it is, when you start like getting into this stuff, it is stuff that's so evil that you're like, it's like worth dying over or flipping out over or something, you know, like even just if you just go study like the war in Iraq and like how these fucking people who wanted this war for years before 9/11, literally wrote, if you go read this, Project for a New American Century, which was the think tank of all the neocons, the people who, it was like 20 people who were the signatories on it. It was like Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl, and I think 10 of the 20 went on to have high-level positions in George W. Bush's administration. And they wrote before 9/11 that our whole plan here is to fight multiple wars in the Middle East, and the first stop is overthrowing Saddam Hussein. And in their own words, they wrote, but we probably can't get public support for that short of another Pearl Harbor type event.
Wow.
And then after 9/11, they went, Got it. This is and then like 1 million people got killed in Iraq. Like just that alone. If you just look at that, number. You're like, yo, this is like so evil. So it's like very easy to flip out over that stuff. I think at least at this point in my life, having a wife and little kids helps a lot. It just kind of focuses me on like, that's my actual life. This is just the stuff I'm interested in talking about.
I could see if you don't have that, you could completely drown yourself in this information because it's never ending.
I think being a comedian before that also really helped. It was just kind of, there was just like this light and fun
You're going to see the levity in this.
Yeah, right. Right. You're always kind of going to be like, okay, well, what can I turn this into a joke? Or at least, even if I couldn't turn it into a joke, tonight I'm going to be at a nightclub with all my friends who happen to be hilarious people. Yeah. We're all going to be laughing and we're all going to be working on our sets. That kind of kept me grounded. And then also, I'm just, whatever my own like insecurity is, I have an obsessive need to not get it wrong. And so I'm constantly guarding myself of like, okay, I'm not going to just fall over the deep end here and just believe some nonsense that's not true just because it kind of suits my narrative. I mean, I naturally guard against that, but I've seen a lot of people who don't guard against that. and it gets bad quick.
And that's where the rabbit hole is probably.
Yeah. I'm curious. You say the government's so evil. Like, I haven't heard you say one good thing is there anything good that the government's doing?
They're really good at being evil. They do a great job. I said the thing about the Nazis, what they did with the Jews. They put up incredible numbers.
Efficient. Shout out
So you don't
IBM.
think there's nothing that the government is doing that's good?
Oh, no, I mean...
There are well-intentioned people in government.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, I think there are well-intentioned people in government, and I think that...
And they get shot in the head off.
But like, they will, if they're too well-intentioned, they know too much. But it's like, I don't know, like, of course there's things they do that are good, but in the same sense that there could be like a serial killer could still do something that's good in his life. Like he might, you know what I mean? Like a serial killer at some point, they might be like, will you donate another $1 for children who need so-and-so? And he's like, okay. And it's like, I think that the instrument itself is kind of evil. So
so anybody who plays it is just going to be complicit with the evil.
Yeah, you're gonna get caught up in that. It's like a system you can't. But in the same, it's like I look at the government as like a criminal organization, morally speaking. So in the same sense, if you were to ask me like, has a mob family ever done anything good? Like, yeah, I'm sure they have.
Boston
I'm sure
was
there
good.
were. Yeah, I'm sure, right, and I'm sure they did. Like even that guy, like like in any of those gangster movies you watch, I'm sure there was a time when some guy was like beating up his wife, and they went and tossed that guy a beating or something like that. Like, there's some good things they do.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is that American government or is that like capital G, the institution of government itself?
The institution everywhere.
Gotcha.
It's
So
all.
I think I think the illusion that we have is that every other country's government is corrupt except ours. Right? Like that's kind of how like Americans go into it. Maybe black Americans are a little bit more distrusting of the government, but once you find out that there are these government institutions or just like corporate entities in general that are operating with like high level collusion and corruption, it's kind of a staggering moment.
What's even I think that's right. But what's even crazier to me is that people who are kind of like on to the government corruption and start realizing how corrupt this whole system is, still, if there's a conflict between us and Russia, they kind of snap back to their like, no matter how corrupt they see our government as being, they could still never see it like Russia. You know what I mean? Like it's been amazing, particularly with the war, since the war in Ukraine broke out, how many people in the US will just be like, we can't stand for someone invading a sovereign country. And you're like, you are familiar with very recent history, right? Very recent. Like I'm not saying like 80 years ago we did something like this. I'm saying we're still there. Like we still have troops in Iraq right now. We still have troops in Syria right now. Is it like what world are you living in that like the vehicle we have is our government so what you think that's DC's motive is that they're just like we just can't stand by while someone invades another country.
So what is your solution?
Well, I mean, like ultimately the solution would be for government to stop doing a lot of the evil stuff that they're doing.
But how do we get that? I'm asking you as like someone I consider a leader in this idea. What would your solution be? I'm not like trying to do gotcha.
Well, we're already in trouble if I'm the leader. But I think that I really think that propaganda is incredibly powerful, like as I was saying before. And I think the fact that like there's so many like shows with huge audiences now that can kind of like shine a light on all this stuff. I think that's really powerful. So in short, I think like telling the truth is very, very powerful. And then in terms of what would actually roll back kind of government corruption, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something going on. We have not figured it out yet, but I'm not saying anything positive about how Donald Trump actually governed, but the fact that there was so much hunger for a Donald Trump-like figure, I think shows something of people waking up. I think
even Bernie too.
Bernie,
I think it was on both sides.
Bobby Kennedy, like all
Honestly,
these guys.
I'm not just saying this because I'm Indian. Vivek.
100%. Vivek Ramaswamy was like.
I mean, he took a very hard line on government corruption. I mean, when he was on the pod, I was like, what if this corruption benefits us in certain ways? Like hypothetically, what if these government policies, this interventionism that we're doing benefits us and gives us a better lifestyle? Would you, if you found that out, would you still want to go through it? And would you still want to go through it if it meant getting rid of the managerial class? That's what he talks about. I'm sure you've heard the term.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, the people deserve a government that represents them for better or worse. So he's like, I will take a shittier America or higher price for food or higher price for medication, whatever it is, if we're actually making the decisions, or there are people representing our decisions.
Yeah, how would you answer that?
Well, I think that, so I'd say that I think if there's one like kind of universal truth that I've found in my life is that like lying to yourself is destructive. I think it's worse than lying to other people. And lying to other people is bad too, but lying to yourself is like the most powerful, destructive thing you can do. And so if it were the case that us going in mass slaughtering a bunch of people in Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan and Syria and Yemen and Somalia and all these places, that gave us a higher standard of living, then let's look ourselves in the mirror and have that honest conversation. Is that who we are? Is the role of the United States of America that we are the world empire and we're going around to take your shit and give it to us? And if you want to have that honest conversation with yourself and then conclude, yes, that's what we're going to do, then at least have that honest conversation. Don't sit here and pretend.
I've had that conversation. This is why I know I ain't shit. I've been like, yeah, all right. You know what I mean? My life is much better. So either I can leave or I can just accept this is what it is, and I ain't leaving.
Well, fair enough.
Unless there's another empire coming, and I'm jumping ship.
That's the first step would be to ask that question. But I just don't believe that it's true. I think that it has made there's special interests that have benefited tremendously off of all of those wars. But I don't know. I mean, I'm like looking around the country, it's like, no, I don't think this has been good for not only our economy, but just like our soul. I don't think it's, I know that's a Biden thing. He said the soul of the nation or whatever, but there's something to that.
You want people to be proud of the country they're living in. I think an American pride right now is at an all-time low, and you got to give them something to be proud of. I've actually thought a lot about this. Like a friend of mine, I got to give him credit, Ben Uyeda. I was like, why are you proud to be American? And he's like, I think you can be the best version of yourself here. And I thought that to me is America and something you still can be represented by.
Yeah.
And but it was important. I thought it was like July 4th, and we were thinking about like doing a piece on it. And it was like, why should we? I think, we have to bolster some like American sentiment. This is a great country. This is amazing. There's all these opportunities. We get to be fucking comedians running around talking shit. And we actually get to, provide for our families. But he brought that up, and he's like, we can be the best version of ourselves here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been the best thing about America is that you could kind of be the author of your own story, and you can kind of like, it's never been perfect, never will be perfect, but it's like, you could like make something of yourself, and I think we very much take it for granted. It has not been true in most of the world for most of human history that you could like come from something kind of humble and make something really cool of yourself here, and that's awesome. But in terms of like, say, like the war stuff and dominating the rest of the world, I don't see any evidence that that's connected to, like that the two are connected. I mean, look, even after we get hit on 9/11, we launched the war on terrorism in late 2001. We started the war in Afghanistan. 2003, the war in Iraq. In 2008, we have the worst financial recession in 100 years. I don't like see this evidence that it's like, this is building up our great economy. Well, it's really beneficial to Lockheed Martin and Raytheon,
but to the average American, it's not.
I don't think so.
Guys, that segment is brought to you by our newest partner, Steak. Okay, you guys already know Steak. You know it because Drake's dropping $500,000 on our boy Stylebender, which is absolutely tragic. Just because Stylebender lost, not because Drake lost $500,000. But listen, we got plenty more things. We got plenty more setups, plenty more bets for you guys to make. You betting on sports. Shoot, if you're going to bet on the presidential election, Steak has got your back. You go there, you make it happen. They are the official partner of the Flagrant podcast. We are happy to have them. Now let's get back to the show.
Do you think there's ever, like we hear about this term like global police and stuff, do you think that since World War II there's been any foreign intervention that's been generally positive or moral?
No.
Great question.
From the United States of America? No.
Korea, anything like that?
No. I mean, it's a disaster in Korea. Well, this awful bloody war ended in a stalemate, and the North Koreans have been prisoners ever since. I mean, it's just, Vietnam was just, horrific, obviously. I think even like Clinton's intervention in Serbia was horrible.
I didn't know that was
Yeah, well, it didn't go well. Vladimir Putin knows. He was pretty pissed about that. But and then, of course, all the terror wars have just been, I mean, just wrecked the Middle East and, you know, spent trillions of dollars on slaughtering hundreds of thousands of people. So, no, I don't think so. And it was like, you know, America was never really supposed to be the policeman of the world. That's a fairly new thing. And it doesn't make sense. It's like you can't. The whole thing about America is we're supposed to be like a constitutionally limited republic. The idea is people are free here, with some exceptions. We got around to it eventually, but it's. So I'm not saying we were perfect, but no, the idea. I mean, come on, it's just like so obvious. It's like, come on, you can't have that much power and it not be corrupting. You're telling me this is what the neocons, also those same ones in A Project for a New American Century, or actually, no, it wasn't A Project for a New American Century, but it was two of the guys. It was Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan, and they wrote in the piece is called "Toward a Neo-Reaganite Foreign Policy." It was in the Weekly Standard, or it was in Foreign Affairs, actually, I think. And they wrote that was what they were suggesting. It was after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they said America has to be the benevolent hegemon.
What's a hegemon?
The you know, it's basically
Benevolent
means
power.
empire.
The
Means
benevolent
controlling
empire of the
everything,
world.
you know. So he's gonna, but the good empire, you know.
Okay.
Like we rule the world, but like we're the good guys.
It is.
all right.
Is it really as simple as there are a few companies that benefit in a dramatic fashion by creating wars around the world? Is it that simple?
No, I mean I think there's more to like that is definitely true. That's just a fact.
But are they sitting in a boardroom going, okay, let's invent some wars because we got some bombs to sell?
Well, I think that there's ideologues in there too, and they all kind of weirdly meet up. And so like if you have like part of the reason that neoconservatives just totally hijacked American foreign policy is that their agenda was that we should be fighting. Like, look, they were saying back in the 90s that when there was this big kind of turning point, which I think was really underappreciated by people around our age, because we were kind of kids in the 90s, and you're kind of like, oh, I just remember that as being a time when America was more America, and now everything's kind of crazy. Back then it was more what we, like, was simple to understand. But what happened in 1991 is the Soviet Union collapsed, and for the first time in human history, there was a true unipolar superpower. Like, there's really never been anything like that before. It was just the United States of America. And there was this big debate about what we're supposed to do now. Like, what, and basically the Soviet Union had been used as the excuse for the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex...
It falls. Now there's no excuse. They have to
no
create
excuse.
one.
Yeah.
Dave.
So this is the whole thing.
Can you just say that one more time so people are
Well,
this is
okay.
really interesting.
So just to rewind a little bit, right? You understand, there was not really a military-industrial complex until World War II. World War II is when it was created. This is Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the 5-star general who led us to victory in World War II.
And then later said,
and when he was president, he goes, listen, that was his farewell address. Listen, we've created this military-industrial complex. We've built up these great big weapons companies. And he was basically saying, there's a business of war now. And it's big business. So now the...
Real quick. This is so important. I just want to make sure everybody understands it. Just the term military-industrial complex, can you just briefly say basically what that means, who you're talking about, and then we get right back.
Just basically that there's a big business of war now. There are these huge manufacturing arms companies that are in the business of selling weapons to the government.
So
and there's big business here, and they're heavily incentivized to get more business. But the way they get more business isn't like you or me. It's not like we got to get more people to come to our shows or something like that. It's like they got to get more politicians to sign off on wars so that they use the weapons they just sold them and need to buy more weapons from them for the next thing.
Okay.
So now William F. Buckley, who was probably...
Sorry to interrupt one more time. Was Eisenhower's point, we need to be wary of this? Or was he like, okay.
No, he was like, we need to guard against them trying to get more power.
Got it.
And this is 5-star general Dwight D. Eisenhower saying it.
The country needed to create one to win World War II.
Yes, to win the war, yes, we probably needed to do that. But
because everybody got on board, right?
But we
Ford was making
necessarily-
tanks and shit. Like it became...
Yes. But then we created, right after World War II, we created the CIA, which was in the beginning supposed to be like kind of like a newspaper for the president, like a secret newspaper. It's like, listen, we need to know what's going on around the world. So you come and give the president all the intelligence of what's really going on. And then it very quickly turned into like a paramilitary secret kind of black ops thing. No offense. So this now Bill Buckley, who was really the most kind of influential conservative figure in the second half of the 20th century. He wrote this big piece about it where he was basically like, in converting the old right into the new cold warriors, he was like, listen, we are supposed to just be like a city on a hill, limited government, traditional conservative thing. But here's the thing, is we got the Soviet Union. So at the end of World War II, the two big winners are America and the Soviet Union, and they're communist. And they were explicitly for world domination. Like they wanted to spread communism across the world. And so then there's this thing like, we have to be in this battle with them. We got to fight a war in Korea. We got to fight a war in Vietnam. We have to. So then in 1991, they collapse. They just throw in the towel. Just as nobody saw it coming on our side of intelligence. Like the CIA didn't see this coming.
Oh, wow.
They thought they were going to be around for a while.
I thought it was a slow decay, and it was just kind of
well,
like
it was, but they didn't really perceive it. So George H.W. Bush at the time, he went over, gave what's called his Chicken Kiev speech, where he was trying to keep the Soviet Union together. Like they didn't want him to collapse. They were, and
because you need the boogeyman, or
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, partly. I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure also they were just like a little concerned about like what replaces this.
Yeah.
You guys got a lot of nuclear weapons. Like what's next, you know? And
enemy you know is better than the enemy.
right.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some of that too. But anyway, as this thing falls in the 90s, there's a lot of debate over like, so what are we supposed to do now? And a lot of conservatives and liberals were like, oh, we can go back to being a normal country now. Like we don't have to dominate the world. We can go back to like, we could have a peace dividend. We can save money on all this stuff. Okay, so the neocons come in and they go, no. This is what Charles Kradenhammer called the unipolar moment. And he was like, look, we have a moment right now that we can remake the world and no one can stop us. No one's got the power. It used to be kind of like, well, could we get away with doing this over here? The Soviet Union might try to stop us. Or can we impose our will on Vietnam versus can the commies impose their will on Vietnam? But he goes, now there's no one like that. We can go do whatever we want to do. And the neocons advocated huge increases in the military budget. Even though the Soviet Union just fell, we're supposed to be pulling back on this. They have a huge increase.
That's crazy.
And then, of course, all of their think tanks got huge donations from weapons companies. So it's not...
now they get to thinking.
Right, exactly, right. You know, so like, is it one thing? Is it as simple as there's this business who has this? It's like, no, there are like these people who I think do have these beliefs. If those beliefs happen to be weapons companies should make a ton more money, the defense budget should be increased by $200 billion, a whole lot of weapons companies are like, I like that young man. I think he's got some important ideas, you know, and so then the system kind of perpetuates itself.
And then go.
There's no fix to stop that, though. Even if you get the truth out there to everyone, just like Akash's honest answer, we're not going anywhere.
Well, I mean, like, yes and no.
Why would they ever stop?
Because nothing lasts forever. Look, the Soviet Union, why did they ever stop? Because eventually they just kind of realized that the jig was up and the people were on to them and they didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And they were like, I guess we could force them all to stay. We could go put down these revolts, but there just wasn't the will anymore. And I weirdly do see America getting closer to that position where, like, at a certain point, the evil people in Washington, D.C., maybe they would be like, you know what, the National Guard, go put down this movement. But the National Guard people, they're like, they don't even really believe in this thing anymore either. They're like, it's kind of wrong what you're doing.
But then they just throw trans in your algorithm and now we're not caring about what you're doing.
Well, that worked for about a decade so far, so yeah, that's one way to play it. No, look, I'm not saying, like, who's gonna win this or not, but I don't think it's, look, what is crazy right now is that, like, if you think about even the COVID, there was I'm trying to remember exactly what time this was. There was like, they came out, I remember saying this to Rogan one time in the green room at the mothership, where I was just like, dude, you know how crazy this is? That they were like floating out the idea of doing another round of lockdowns. It was like right at the end of like the Omicron variant or something like that. And you know how they do these things? They put trial balloons out there. You know, they go, we're thinking about having a national vaccine, passport
test the
database.
reaction.
And then like people get furious and then they go, no, we were never going to do that anyway. They're always testing what they can get away with. And they floated out lockdowns again. And it was just like for 3 days on Twitter, everybody was like, I will burn this place to the ground if you try to do lockdowns again. I was like, that's not happening. And I said to Joe, I was like, you might be the reason why we're not having lockdowns again. Like you may have just changed the course of the, like if it was all just corporate media and you hadn't like broken that paradigm, they may, I don't know for sure, but like they may have been able to get away with this again. And so stuff like that is like, I actually think there's a lot of that going on where there's things that, it's like you can't see the counterfactual.
Voices that are not under their control.
And what could they have gotten away with if they didn't have that?
So we're just comparing it to what exists, not what it could have been without, I guess, these like free voices.
Does that reach globally, you think? Because like, did they impose that anywhere else, like a late stage Omicron lockdown or whatever?
I do think, I don't know. I don't think so.
Didn't China have a second lockdown?
China had a few rounds of lockdowns there. But China, they can do whatever they want. But
what would be the benefit of another lockdown for them? Like, who profits off of that?
Oh, it was really good for big business, man. Lockdowns were great for big business because it killed all the small and mid-sized businesses, put their competition out, and then everyone's ordering from Amazon. You know what I mean? It's all like it was very good.
It's a big wealth transfer, like those couple years.
And then for all it was the largest transfer of wealth in human history.
That's what I read.
Yeah. Oh no, it clearly was. I mean, it's just the bills that they were signed. I mean, they printed like $6 trillion in 2020 and handed it out. I don't know, like American people got like $1,200 and then the rest went to corporations.
Yeah. You hear a lot of buzzwords in these types of conversations. Companies like BlackRock is always brought up. Why is BlackRock evil?
They don't seem good.
And why not? Like you'll hear these, they're buying all the single family homes. Like, okay, they're not allowed to do that. Are they a hedge fund? They're allowed to buy all the wheat. You know what I mean? But why are they specifically bad, and why are they worse than another hedge fund?
Well, I think it's as simple as that they're like they're the biggest,
they're the
or
best
it's them and
inflict the most
them and a few others, and it's just you just see kind of like this thing being consolidated into like just what it's like Vanguard and there's like a couple really big ones, but it's also just that they're like in these like crazy corrupt partnerships. Like it's not, it's like if a company gets really big organically, like just in the market, I mean, it's like you rarely see people angry about that.
NVIDIA is a good example.
Well, it's anything where it's voluntary. It's just kind of like, I don't know, that's what people are choosing to go to. They're choosing to get their products from there because they like the product or whatever. Like, but when you're getting, say, big because you're getting like all the government contracts, or for example, like with some of these big companies where, and by the way, Vivek Ramaswamy wrote about this in his book. It's really interesting. One of his books, Woke Inc., I think. Where it's like they'll have these like state pension funds. So they have the pensions for every government employee in like California, say. So they've got like just billions and billions of dollars, because the only people who have good pensions are government workers anymore. And so they get to choose where they're going to invest that money. And they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll invest it in these companies, but only if you meet certain DEI standards. Or only, you know what I mean? So it's like
impose their will on the company.
Yes, they kind of impose their own cultural agenda through financial means, but it wasn't like a bottom-up thing. Like whenever it's a bottom-up thing, you don't see this type of like resentment over it. Like if there's like a bottom-up thing, like I do think like the acceptance of like gay marriage was very much a bottom-up thing. Eventually people were just like not everyone was cool with it. It took some of us longer than others, but you know what I mean? Like, but it's like, but this is different. Like this stuff all being pushed is totally top down.
Okay. What's happening? What happened on the Twitter Spaces? You popped in with Candace. What was the conversation? What's going on? What does she latch on to? What does she care? What is she trying to do? She feels that America has been taken hostage by Israel?
Well, I think from what I understand, it kind of started. So she was over at the Daily Wire, and I do think this was, I don't know Candace like super well, but we've done shows together and we've hung out a little bit, and she seems to be very genuine to me.
Yeah.
But she, I guess, had just had a baby, and she's had, I think, several kids in a short period of time.
2, right?
I think 3.
Yeah.
But like, and so she had just given birth, and the war in Gaza kicks off, and she started talking on her show about like how heartbreaking the images of like all these dead kids in Gaza was. And I guess because it was a Daily Wire show and the people she was were around her and people started like flipping out at her like oh, that Israel has to do this, how dare you criticize Israel, blah blah blah. And she was like, I'm just saying it's sad to see dead kids. And when she got that kind of pushback, I think that's her personality type, where she was immediately like, I'm doubling down on this now and I'm gonna really dig into this. And she got more and more critical of what Israel was doing and the Israeli kind of relationship with Israel, which there's a lot to criticize there the more you look into it.
Our relationship with Israel?
Yeah, the relationship.
What is our relationship? What is misunderstood about our relationship with Israel?
Well, okay, so John Mearsheimer, who's like just a total genius and one of like the, I think, the kind of leading world intellectuals on like foreign affairs. Like the way he put it, which I think is more or less right, is that it's unlike any other relationship between any other two countries. The relationship between the United States of America and the government of Israel is like they get unconditional support from us. We prop them up in everything they do, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
And no matter whether we want them to do something else, whether they do exactly the opposite of what we have. If we just go, hey, I know you've done these 9 things, could you just not do this 10th thing? It's a real problem for us. They go, nope, we're doing the 10th thing, and we still fund them while they do it. And that's true for a lot of different reasons.
Why?
Well, part of it is because there's a very powerful lobby in the United States of America called AIPAC.
Yeah, what is AIPAC?
AIPAC is the Israeli lobby, and basically...
Is that actually what it is? Or?
Yeah, it's the American-Israeli lobby.
What does that mean?
So they'll say they're not a foreign lobby, they're a lobby of Americans, lobby on behalf of a foreign country. So it's kind of like...
And are there other lobbies that are like this, like for Qatar? Are there other lobbies that are like this for Saudi Arabia?
Nothing like AIPAC.
Nothing like AIPAC, but there are other countries that are financially incentivized.
They certainly have. Yeah, there's business interests all around, but AIPAC is particularly powerful and is very good at getting people in a lot of trouble if they're critical of Israel. And on top of that, then you have this kind of widespread belief amongst evangelical Christians that the Jews kind of have to be in control of Israel in order for Jesus to come back and save them or whatever. And so,
boy, did that work out for the Jews, huh?
well,
I mean,
well, if you listen to the evangelicals, it's not going to work out well ultimately. They get Israel for a little bit, but you're not coming along for this ride. Just so you know, like that's not actually, it doesn't actually help you that much. But you better accept Jesus pretty soon.
They'll convert.
Right.
If you see the J-Man come back, you got it, right?
Yeah.
Hey, if he comes back, I'll sign up.
Comes back. Let's go.
I'll tell you.
Let's go.
Comes back.
Let's go.
Listen, I'll tell you, and you can, as a Jewish person myself, we are a stubborn people.
Okay.
And I can see a lot of Jews, like even if Jesus came back, just being like, no, it's an illusion. So there's a weird relationship where, because of a lot of different circumstances, American politicians are kind of have an inability to put any pressure on Israel, but are required to support them.
So what are those circumstances? Again, I truly just don't know.
So,
And I think this is important because this helps people veer away from anti-Semitism.
And I would say,
I want to be
'cause
critical,
all that stuff is
but
stupid.
I don't
want to
empower these fucking idiots.
And I think people are,
You know what I mean?
I think people are
Anti-Semite
insecure. I think
Yeah.
they're insecure to ask even questions.
No.
No, but I think they're like concerned to ask questions because they're like, I don't want to come across as one of these people that I see are just blatantly anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
want to
Stay
veer into
silent.
giving them any ammo.
No, I listen. I completely understand that, and it's like
Because there's
I
no
don't
question there is an absurd amount of anti-Semitism online right now. But there are questions that are not anti-Semitic at all that we should be able to ask and get to the bottom of.
Yeah.
And like steel man the answers. Like literally give what would AIPAC's best argument be, and like
Well, sure, but also if you don't, it's almost like if you don't ask these questions that are reasonable questions, then you cede the ground to the Jew haters, and those are the only people who are asking these questions.
Right.
And then they seem like,
And
well,
that's
how
why I
come
think
no one
this
else is willing to talk
so
about
important.
that?
So if you want to be critical of Israel and not Jewish people, you say, hey, here's the issue.
And not just that, but like
we just want to know about the relationship.
But dude, the best critics, or at least a lot of the best critics of Israel, are Jewish people. I mean, the tradition of Jews who criticize Israel is like, I mean, from Noam Chomsky to Max Blumenthal and Glenn Greenwald. And like, there's a ton of Jews
That's the
who
other
are like,
conversation I want to get to eventually. Like, what do Israelis think right now? And I think that, you know, we may have lost the plot with that a little bit. Like, America got tons of criticism for the war in Iraq, right?
Yeah.
And there was a separation, though. I think people would be like, America's fucked up, but I like American music, I like American TV shows, I like American culture, but America was fucked up. And there was this separation. And I feel like with Israel, there isn't that much.
No,
so I'm curious what the people there think.
Sure. Well,
but get to that after.
Either way, I mean, that's it's a really good point. And in fact, it was in Osama bin Laden's declaration of war against America that he basically said, like, look, here are our grievances, is what your government's done to us. And since you guys have free elections and you've elected this government, you are also fair game, and we can also kill your citizens. And so, like, but I'm just saying that's the mentality of Osama bin Laden, who is, if you follow the story, not the good guy in the story. You know, and so, like, that's the mentality of saying that, like, you're not going to separate, like, the actions of a government from, like, some dude who runs a bakery or something there. Like, they're all the same.
But we do
thing.
elect him. I mean, he has a good point.
Yeah, but at
And
the
he
same
makes
time, you can't hold regular people responsible for the crimes of their government. You know?
And especially you, when you look at how corrupt and nefarious governments can be and how they can restrict the people's ability to be represented, of course.
Right.
But the idea in like a true representative government, it would be like, hey, you put that guy there and he is doing your bidding. We now know that that is not the case. So you can't hold us accountable.
Right.
Because we're kind of held hostage.
Yeah, well, that's right. And
so that separation should exist, and there's that protection. But the logic is, if it was a true democracy, the logic would make sense.
I could kind of get where you're coming from.
No?
I'd still
Because
say,
you don't know what they're going to do once you elect them into office.
But what if they're
told us
like
a bunch of things, and then they can flip the script once they're in?
That's a fair point. But if they went into office with these ideas and we elected them for that reason, you could at least hold the people that elected them accountable.
I mean, I guess
I don't think you can kill them though.
Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I always tend to be like on the side of people against the corrupt.
And also,
powerful,
who was running on a hey, let's kill everybody in the Middle East policy?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
even in those situations, they always kind of propagandize people into thinking they need to do this, or it's somehow going to be in their interest. Look, as far as like how the people in Israel are feeling, I'd say that, like, let's say pre-October 7th, just like historically, there's always been a much wider array of opinion on Israel inside Israel than there is in the United States of America. And there's been tremendous pressure put on the Israeli government by Israelis to not be so brutal to the Palestinians over the years. Like, there's listen, it was in it ended up making its way to our press too. But on October 8th, Tal Schneider for the Times of Israel wrote a huge piece about how for years Benjamin Netanyahu propped up Hamas. And like it was like the next day. There was like, this is your creation, or maybe not creation, but at least you've aided them for your own purposes for all of these years. And look what happened now. You got all of our people killed over this, and now we got this war on our hands. And so like they were pointing the finger right at him, whereas like on October 8th, you wouldn't have had, if someone had said that here that'd have been crazy, you know, like radioactive. And so like there is a diversity of opinion. Also, you know, like anything else, there's this kind of rally around the flag effect. And after October 7th, there was a lot of people in Israel who were like, let's go get these guys no matter what, which is kind of
That's
the
what
same way
happens
we
when
felt
you-
after 9/11 and all of that.
Absolutely. Okay.
And by the way, the same way the Palestinians feel after some Israeli strike kills a bunch of them, and they're like, let's go get them.
they're easily galvanized.
Have you heard that there's congressmen are like assigned an AIPAC handler? Like there was like dude from Kentucky that's
Thomas Massey.
So break this down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So break down AIPAC, how they influence. Break down this that
Do,
you.
do you believe that? Like, is that what?
No, it's actually true. There's a checklist if you're
it's
going to be in
100%
Congress or the Senate. Like, part of your thing is you do the trip, and everyone gets to say, "I've gone on that trip to Israel." It's their birthright. Because
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't deny it because I've gone to a talk, and then they'll come to me and they want me to pledge my 1800.
So you're Jewish like me, right? So how crazy is it that
Not like you.
A little different.
Okay, fair enough. So you're a good one.
Yeah. Both your dicks are cut.
But
That's about it.
Hey,
that's what we're really talking about here. But how crazy is it, right, that even that, so I mean, I don't think I have mine anymore. I'm not sure, but I don't think they would let me in. But just being Jewish, you have what they call a birthright to go to Israel on them, a free trip, and you can also become a citizen there anytime. Like you have a right to Israel. Yet the people living in that land for hundreds of years before the Zionist project have no right to return to their homes. They they still have keys, some of the older ones there to their homes, and they have no right to go back to it, which is just so wild to me. But anyway, that's kind of neither here nor there. I'm sorry, what was the question?
AIPAC, just the
So yes, well, look, Thomas
Overarching conversations, how
Thomas
Israel
Massey's
has
telling
so
the
much-
truth about that. Yeah, they
Or maybe first, can you just explain how lobbying works in general, and then break down?
Well, I'd say it like this, okay? So after 9/11, Colin Powell went to George W. Bush. Colin Powell was the wisest member of the George W. Bush administration. Still, pretty bad guy, but he was by far the wisest of the people in George W. Bush's room. And the thing he told George W. Bush after 9/11 was, you have to make a two-state solution now. Like, this is the time to do it. You just hit 9/11, you have record high approval ratings. This is the time that you can cram this through and get it done. And you have to do it. And why? Because he knew. He goes, this is at the heart of why we have this terrorism problem. Like the central reason why they hate us is because we prop up Israel and they kicked the Palestinians out of like their holy land. And they, you know what I mean? And then there were other reasons too. They didn't like that we had our military bases in Saudi Arabia, bombing Iraq and all of these things. But he really pushed him to do it. And George W. Bush agreed. He was like, okay, I mean, if Colin Powell tells me that's what I got to do, I'll go do that. And then it was Tom DeLay in the House of Representatives who said, if you push for a two-state solution, I guarantee you're a one-term president. Because AIPAC will turn on you in a second. We'll whip every evangelical Christian against you. Like, it's just over for you. And so he just gave up on doing it.
Oh, interesting.
So that's kind of, in effect, how it works.
So the evangelical vote is tied to the Israeli lobby in a way, even though they're really not tied for like the future, but for the immediate.
Kind of, yeah.
This is like that thing you're saying when like there's two different things that have the same interest.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's
Yeah,
interesting
exactly,
is you go from, I mean, what percentage of Americans are Jewish? I mean, what?
0.2%.
So,
But I thought you were about to say too many. I was about to be like, whoa, easy.
so if the evangelical Christians are tied to, I guess, let's just call it American Jews. I know American Jews don't all have the same opinion, but let's just call it percentage-wise. You take that 2% and you increase it significantly.
Oh, yeah.
So now
there's a lot of evangelical Christians in this country.
Yeah.
There's like tens of millions of them.
So now it's not such a minority. I think a lot of times that people are looking and they throw that number around, like, why do we have so much consideration for 2% of the population? Well, because 2% of the population and a large swath and a huge voting bloc all agree on a really important thing for their identity. So you're not really looking at 2%. Got it. Now, now it's making sense.
You do, it kind of built up this culture. And again, this isn't anything like that. It's not, the problem when people go down the path of like, just like the anti-Semitic stuff, just hating Jews in general, is that it's like with anything else, you know, it's like the same mistake that like feminists make whenever they talk about men. Or like when a feminist will just be like, they'll be like 95% of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are men.
Yeah.
And then they extrapolate from that some comment on men.
Yeah.
But you're like, but that's not men. That's like this tiny substrata of men, the tiniest of men. You know what I mean? Like this is like being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company does not explain the life of an average man at all. And then you're like, oh, well, you could also look at like, prisons or homeless or all the, it's just like whenever you try to collectivize people, right? It's much more complicated than that. But it's also like Jews are very successful, broadly speaking. And so, all right, if you offend Jews, there ends up being consequences that there aren't necessarily for other groups. I mean, look, if you think about like, let's imagine like black people in this country had the wealth that Jewish people have. And after the George Floyd, thing or something,
The government would start making sneakers.
So now the government's making sneakers, okay? And they're making some good sneakers. But so after George Floyd, someone, goes like, he was on fentanyl or blah, blah, blah. I don't think the cop did anything wrong. You think that guy would lose his job or lose his pet? There might be some black people who are like, no, you know what? We're going to punish this guy for saying that thing. So that does end up happening, right? People do kind of get like punished for speaking out against this. And then that starts building up like a resentment against it.
Well, yeah. Well, who resents it?
The people who speak up about it, for sure. Yeah, and a lot of people on Twitter.
Do you get fired for simply speaking out, or do you get punished rather or do you get punished for saying something that is not true?
I think there's definitely been cases of people getting punished for saying things that are true. I mean, I remember Pat Buchanan said once, this was years ago, right? This is like in the 90s. And he was talking about the first war in Iraq, the Persian Gulf War under George H.W. Bush. And he goes, nobody in America wants this war in Iraq except for some weapons companies and the Israel lobby. And they flipped out on him for saying that. And
Did they
yes!
Well, why would they?
They totally
out?
wanted it because you're just not. It's anti-Semitic. What are you saying? Oh, you're saying the Jews want war. You're saying that Jews are manipulating us into war, like something like that. But like, no, he was talking about a very specific group. And look,
I mean, aren't there like minutes? Aren't there like records that show?
It just doesn't matter. But like it just.
If they have been,
well, they certainly were lobbying for it. No question about it. Look,
why would it be advantageous to them?
Well, because they were, Saddam Hussein was a big rival of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu came and testified before Congress in 2002, right after 9/11. This is now going to the next. And he came over and testified as a regional expert that if we just overthrow Saddam Hussein, democracy will sweep the region. It'll have all these positive reverberations. And oh, by the way, you should also have a regime change war in Iran. That should be next up for you guys. But it is just kind of all his enemies, like all his regional enemies. He's lobbying us to get our young boys to go fight a war over there on his behalf. Now, when you call that out, if you call that out, it's very easy to sound anti-Semitic. But like, you don't have to be. You don't have to hate Jews to just point out that it's like, well, hey, look, there's a foreign government lobbying us into a war.
Question. It is their job to lobby us.
Sure.
It is every country's job to convince the more powerful countries to do the things that they want. Don't we kind of got to blame the evangelical Christians? I'm just like, you can't. No. Ultimately, we have to take responsibility for what we do as a country. But what I'm trying to say is they are so easily manipulated into supporting a foreign government because of this thing that they believe in that now, and without them, the lobbying wouldn't work. Based on what I'm understanding from you. Meaning you need the numbers and you need the votes. It's not just the money. You can't just pay the politicians. You still need votes at the end of the day.
I more than agree. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. And
that could be blanket statement, but I guess what I'm just trying to say is I don't totally believe that you could do this without voting support.
Oh, no, 100%.
So you need a group to come and support blindly. And it seems like they're supporting blindly.
But isn't it groups like AIPAC and evangelical groups that tell them which way to vote?
Wait a minute,
like it's the groups that are telling them which way to vote. So it's like I wouldn't blame the actual.
But I guess what I would say is
just
if I'm a country, right, and I'm friends with America. I'm trying to get America to do everything I want.
Of course.
I'm like, yo, these guys are trying to knock down our door. They're trying to kill us. Should we just take them out? Can we get the better trade agreement with China for this thing over? Every day I'm calling up America and I'm like, what can we do to make my country's life better?
But the criticism of Israel is not what they do to America. It's what they're doing to Palestine.
But well, I think it's twofold. It's like, yes, there's criticism for that 100%, but it's the fact that we're supporting it, which makes our discourse here so intense.
Because you look at it on paper,
if they were
why
doing
are we agreeing to do these things? And then we see the politicians, like, why are the politicians agreeing to do these things?
Exactly.
So the person you get mad at is the person who's forcing the politicians.
Yeah, it doesn't
to do
stop
this.
on Netanyahu in that.
That's
who was
who we should be
who was
upset
saying, all right, we'll follow this little path. Like, who's his?
Yeah, well, look, again, so there's all types of blame to go around, right? But like, I wouldn't let Netanyahu off the hook for that either, because it's not as if like he's just advocating that like, oh, we get more foreign aid.
Can I
from Israel or
clarify my
something.
position? He could be advocating for something disgusting, horrible, horrific. That's bad. But let's say he's doing what he believes is the best thing for his country. We as Americans should be able to look and go, that's disgusting, horrible, horrific.
100%.
We're not supporting
100%,
that.
yeah.
And then one day he might be like, yo, here's this cool technology. We want to trade with you. And we'll be like, well, that's really cool. Yeah, we'll do that trade. But it seems to me, and again, I might not know, that because of this large voting bloc, these evangelicals that will blindly support whatever Israel wants, we are manipulated into the support of these things that we find horrendous.
Yeah,
Many people-
I
Is that-
agree with
is that-
I agree with
Yeah,
that.
but
Too
many-
simplistic?
No,
give me pushback.
Sorry,
I'll
many
push back on
people
that.
have their resurrection. Many people have their issue, trans bathrooms. The masses are easily manipulated. You just find the hot button issue for any voting bloc. You can flip them. I just got to press the right button. So their button happens to be this.
But this is very tricky because in order for what the evangelicals want to happen, they need to secure the Jews in the Holy Land. And if the Jews simply go, hey guys, if you don't support us in this war, we're not going to be in the Holy Land. J-Man not coming back. So they have to go, we got to keep them there, whatever they got to do.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
It's bigger than trans bathrooms is what I'm trying to say. It is.
The stakes are high.
I can't speak for an evangelical, but I think if you ask most people and they're like, hey, if you see the images, what's going on in Gaza, how do you feel about that? I think most people will be like, that's bad, it makes me feel bad. But if the group, if AIPAC or if an evangelical group is like, they are holding hostage their group of voters to force politicians to do their bidding. So I don't think it's the actual people that are just like, nah, we need to keep sending money to Israel. I think it's the group that's telling the politicians like, hey, if you don't keep sending money to Israel, I'm going to get my whole voting bloc to vote against you next term.
Yeah.
So I'm not putting it on the people at all. I put it
And they
all on
control
the
the news
groups that
cycle to
control
say
the people.
Hamas is doing X, Y, and Z. It's all Hamas. We got to get Hamas out of here. You can, yeah.
No,
it's just-
sure, there's horrible manipulation and propaganda going on. There's no question about that. What I'm saying is, without that specific group, maybe they find another group. But without that group, I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Do you think it is?
I think that there's no question that voting bloc has been like indispensable for them. So, but then again, to your point, it's also like, it's not just, it's like every evangelical, I shouldn't say every, but so many evangelical pastors are out there like preaching to their people, and you got to support Israel and you got to support the politicians who support them. So it's like I don't know, any one of these factors not being there, we might be looking at a different equation.
How do you disconnect the two?
yeah, that's
well,
a great
Like, is there no conversation within the evangelical? I imagine there is a
there
conversation
is.
in
There
the
is,
evangelical
and I think
community about
there's
that.
even debates, and this I just don't know enough about. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about whether this is like theologically correct or not, but there's a whole other argument, which I tend to think that they're right, that there's a whole other group of Christians who are like, by the way, this is a complete misinterpretation of the Bible.
Oh,
that
really?
we don't need Jews there. This is not a real thing.
Yeah.
This is just, that's like, so I
What's
don't
that
know
argument?
I
enough
mean, there's
about
like
that.
specific language in the Bible that says, like, specifically in the Old Testament, that like all people, or like anyone who goes against Israel, and it says exactly Israel will be cursed, and all people that support Israel will be blessed, and that's word from God. And so people like evangelical pastors interpret that literally to say the nation of Israel, whereas other people interpret that to say, oh, this is a metaphor for God's people. that all the people that are a
This
part
was
of,
written way before the creation of the state of Israel, so it's like not clear that that's what they're referring to.
but it is in reference to like the Old Testament nation of the Israeli Jews.
Right.
So it is what some people would say is a metaphor to say all of God's chosen people.
Yeah, but that's
So-
Old Testament. Aren't
Well-
y'all the New Testament?
Well, hold on one
They
second.
work in tandem based on interpretation.
But God's chosen people being the Jews.
Being Christians is what a new interpretation would be. That Israel is in reference to all people that are Christian, that follow God, that read the Bible and, Old
I don't
Testament
like
and New
this one.
Testament.
I don't like this one.
Shifty, you
Keep it-
hear anything about this?
Keep it that way.
What has your interpretation been? Or what have you been taught?
So I was brought up that everyone was God's chosen people, and that's what Christians are.
But if everyone's God's chosen people, then God doesn't really have a chosen
Yeah, Israel.
people.
Well, not everyone.
Then we got to. That's like if everyone's beautiful.
That
Then
means
what does that mean anymore? Like, come on.
that Israel is basically.
He is a Jew. We got him.
Listen, it's in me. I mean, I can only go so far.
That all people could be chosen, that Israel is a metaphor for all Christians of the world.
Okay, so are you familiar at all with the evangelical discourse about this?
I'm not super familiar with it. I know that there's been I've heard some Catholics and Orthodox Christians really giving pushback to the evangelicals about this because they don't believe any of that stuff. They're like, whatever it is, I don't remember, I just don't know enough. But it's something like, that's not even what Israel means by that. Israel means something else.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't mean any political group that was formed in 1948. You know what I mean? That's not right. Either way, that's not what motivates me is what is the correct interpretation of the Bible. I'm just saying that personally, I think this is really bad policy for Israel. I think it's totally self-destructive for them, and I think they've totally turned global opinion against them. They're now on the precipice of a much wider war. They've had conflict with the Houthis in Yemen and with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Iran. Obviously, there's always building, tensions there. And so it's you're looking at this much wider regional war with the world opinion turning against you.
The most destructive thing is lying to yourself.
Yeah, that's
You know what I
right.
mean?
Is there not a strategic advantage?
Yeah, wasn't that their plan maybe? 10 months
Is
ago?
there not a strategic advantage to having? I heard people say this, having a democracy in the region, like a Western alliance
But the
with.
thing is, first, I don't know. I mean, the issue is that Israel isn't really a democracy. And they're a democracy within Israel, but Israel has had control of Gaza and the West Bank since 1967. And you could kind of get away with occupying a group of people for, a few years after a war while you're figuring out what you're going to do or on the transition to giving them their independence or something. But, they've been occupying, and I already hear in the YouTube comments, people will be like, well, they pulled out of Gaza in 2005. It's and then they put a full blockade around the country and they dominate every single inch of what happens in Gaza. But, if you've been occupied, it's 5 million Palestinians or something in that ballpark between Gaza and the West Bank. None of them have any voting rights. None of them have any rights at all. And so how long can you have control of an area with a whole bunch of non-citizens who don't have voting rights before you sit there and go, but they're the only democracy in the regions? Not really. I don't know. I don't think we would consider it a democracy if you had half your population just was completely disenfranchised. So I don't think, I just totally think that's wrong. And also I think that, us being, I'm not even saying we shouldn't be friends with Israel. I think we should, in fact. And I think that a few months back, after Israel killed that Iranian in Syria, and Iran sent all those rockets at it, we helped defend Israel, and so did Saudi Arabia and Jordan. But okay, that's somewhat reasonable as far as interventions go. But the idea that we're unconditionally behind Israel and do nothing, for the Palestinians, I don't think that helps us at all. And in fact, I think it's a huge part of the reason why we're so hated in the Muslim world. And it wasn't always like that,
What do you mean?
Okay, so after World War I, they set up what's called the King Crane Commission. and they went around. They were basically trying to figure out what we were going to do with some of these areas, like the Ottoman Empire had
Ottoman
just
Empire
fallen.
falls. You got to organize some stuff. Yeah.
And they went and they surveyed like thousands and thousands of people. They went to Palestine at the time. They went to Syria. And Syria, they asked them who they wanted to rule them in a League of Nations mandate. And they overwhelmingly voted for America, because there was just like this positive feeling about America in that part of the world. Like it was like the French and the British they hated, because they had been horrible to them. But America was like seen as like, oh, that's the freedom people, the city on a hill. Like we like those guys. And so I'm not saying whenever I bring this up, people love to go like, what about the Barbary Wars or something? Like I'm not saying we never had any conflict with Muslims before, but the serious hatred that
That's a
we
deep
have.
cut, by the way.
Barbary it's like,
Wars.
yes, in 1801.
People are bringing that up.
Yeah, they do. They like to bring it up.
This is okay. Go on.
But I think that it's there's a lot of costs.
Didn't Jefferson send like the Navy to?
I think he made the Navy
just
to send them there.
Yeah, what a fucking.
And it's a crazy story, by the way, too, which is like I don't know enough about it to really.
Yeah, your
speak
followers are too
intelligently.
smart.
Yeah, well, there's maybe I don't know.
Okay, go
I got
on.
some dummies out there, but like it was something. It was like I know the British and the French, they used to just pay them off.
Yeah,
like
and it was
they were
pirates
like,
essentially.
They were just pirates, and they were like,
And
if you wanna sail through here, you got to pay us off.
America
they were
said,
like, it's
fuck that.
Yeah, but you could
We
imagine
send in the boys.
But there's something like about Thomas Jefferson, like the author of the Declaration of Independence, and they're like, there are these pirates, and like the French and the British just pay them off, and Thomas Jefferson is like, a free people do not pay off, because no one man can own the oceans, and had some like highfalutin belief about it.
Just autistic.
Really. Just like, but so then he like raises up this navy, sends them out there, fights this war, and I really don't know this, but you almost just like want to like run the math on it. You're like, you spent more, didn't you?
Yeah.
You spent a lot more than if you had just paid him off. Probably could have just worked.
First military-industrial complex. All right, guys, let's take a break for a second, man, because we got a little experiment to do right here. Your boy needs to try some rocket fuel, okay? 3 drops. Right there. For you to breathe again. Do you want to breathe again? Oh, that actually, that's nice.
You feel that?
That's actually nice. Rocket Fuel, if you guys are not familiar, is a fantastic supplement to help you breathe better. A synergistic blend of active manuka honey and nature's best essential oils designed to support the entire respiratory system. You don't need breathing issues to use and benefit from Rocket Fuel. Okay, breath coaches and athletes all over the world are using this. They are loving it. It helps with their performance. So if you want to breathe better, perform better, recover faster, Rocket Fuel gives your body and mind a lift, and you can use it daily to improve overall well-being and boost immunity. That's nice, man. I'm not gonna lie. That's nice, cool, crisp.
Let me get that.
But it definitely does open up the wow.
I got asthma.
Anyway, breathe better and perform better with Rocket Fuel. Go to www.savvytouch, that is SAVVY touch.com, and use the promo code Flagrant to get 20% off your first order. Let that kick in. Take a few deep breaths. That's nice and
whew. It's like Vicks, but for inside.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Anyway, let's get back to the show. Peace.
We're going to take a break real quick. Have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? Guys, there are some nasty habits out there, and if you want to cut it, this is the #1 alternative. It is a whole new movement toward better habits, led by the sponsors of this little ad right here in today's episode, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. It is not like vaping. If vaping was like a sugar-filled soda, Fume cores would be like an herbal tea. They have tons of delicious flavors to choose from. I like the orange vanilla. They also have a crisp mint. They have a bunch of other ones. With flavored air, you satisfy your oral fixation, pause, fast forward, through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, no vapor, no combustion. Fume is not a vape. There is no vapor, and you can use it anywhere, and most importantly, there is no nicotine. It is not addictive at all. It also looks fire, and it feels fire. It's got a nice weight to it. This is quality, and this is something that I really love. I'm a very fidgety person. You hear that? That little fidget right there? It calms anxiety, gives you something to do. It's an adjustable Airflow Dial, I think it's called. But anyway, the point is Fume has served over 300,000 customers, helped them kick nasty habits, and there's no reason you can't be their next success story. And for a limited time, if you use our code FLAGRANT, you get a free gift with your journey pack. So head to tryfume.com, that is TRYFUM.com, and use the code FLAGRANT to get a free gift with your order today. Now let's get back to the show.
I mean, every country does that, I'm pretty sure. Like, they make a navy to protect, like, their trade interests. So, like, China didn't really have a navy until they started, like, shipping shit international, and they're like, all right, let's
I mean, that makes
get a
sense.
navy set up.
Yeah, you got to send some security with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were talking about the, what is it? Wars with Muslims in the region,
Oh, yeah.
and basically having...
So there was a positive sentiment towards America
Yes.
in the region, at least after World War I.
Yeah, it was certainly much better than it has been
Than it
since
is now.
then. And then, the creation of Israel pissed off a lot of people, obviously. And I'm not trying to like make this like a one-sided story, because I do think that there's like there's obviously been atrocities committed on both sides, and all of that's bad. But I just like a lot of, like you can go on YouTube and you can find like Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager and all these guys. They have like these videos. It'll be like, the brief history of Israel by Ben Shapiro.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
well, the Jews wanted to start a free country, and then the Arabs attacked them. I'm not even like exaggerating. That's like the story of their history. And it's like, well, I mean, there was a middle part there.
Yeah.
That you kind of left
And
out.
I understand the need for a Jewish nation when they historically get persecuted, slaughtered, whatever. I just feel like, maybe you just give them the Dakotas. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we got some states we're not really using.
Have you heard a good foreign policy solution for the region? Like, that protects Israel from getting ran over by Iran or any other aggressor,
Yeah, I mean, like
but also preserves,
so at every
Palestinians.
point, at every point that there were like meaningful negotiations, it was always basically predicated on the fact that 67 borders, and what they mean when they say 67 borders are basically the way it happened was as the Zionist settlers before Israel was created started moving to what was known as Palestine then. And they were trying to get more and more people to move there. At first, they had a lot of trouble getting, as most Jews who were like in London or New York or wherever were like, I'm an accountant and things are okay. And I don't really feel like going to be a poor farmer in Palestine. Like, what is this project? After World War II and after the Nazis were defeated, it really picked up steam, and a lot of people wanted to move. There was a lot of it's a really interesting history.
They discovered Sephardics.
Well,
Hey.
that also happened like a little bit later as the Sephardic Jews all came. They were kicked out of neighboring Arab countries, but so
22 of them.
basically they had been working on creating a Jewish homeland there for decades. And in 1947, when the British basically got out of there because the Jews had become terrorists and basically drove them out of Palestine, they kicked it over to the United Nations, which was brand new. And the United Nations was like, well, why don't we divide up the land? Like they made a recommendation. It wasn't like the General Assembly had no authority to just like carve up countries, but they were like, this is what we recommend. And they recommended that the Jews get 56% of the land and the Arabs get 44% of the land. And that was really not based on anything. I think Jews owned like 10% of the land at the time or something like that. The Arabs were like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, this has been our home for hundreds of years, thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're not giving them the majority. And then a civil war broke out, and about 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out and never allowed back in. And those are the people who are in Gaza and the West Bank to this day, or the children and grandchildren of them.
Yeah.
Some of them are in Jordan and Lebanon and stuff. And so like this, and then the neighboring Arab countries attacked. They fought a war. They fought a war again in the 50s. They fought a war again in the 60s. They fought a war again in the 70s. I mean, it was like there were major problems that came along. And it's a very rich history with a lot of, this side's story or this side's story. But you could at least grant that, unlike what Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager say in their videos, no, there is a Palestinian side to this story where like a lot of those people were genuinely wronged. And yes, there were some Palestinians who embraced terrorism pretty early on. It was a very bad strategy for them, has not worked out well for their people, and also is just horrible and wrong. But the America ultimately coming into this, which the U.S. was not at first, but ultimately deciding that we will be unconditionally on one side of this conflict, I think was not smart or fair or wise.
And how did that happen? Was that AIPAC even back then, or do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly. You know, there was a lot of interesting stuff kind of behind the scenes. I don't know exactly. I know that there was definitely some blackmail stuff going on. The Ben Gurion was definitely at least attempting to blackmail Alan Dulles for a while. This was in the 60s, who's the head of the CIA here.
Dulles Airport, right?
I believe the airport is named after his brother. But check on that. His brother was Secretary of State, I believe. I think they wouldn't name the airport after the CIA director. That would just be too in our face. Like, what? You get an airport? But whatever. I mean, they worked pretty closely together. Yeah, tell me, who's the airport named after?
John
Dulles. Yeah, he was the Secretary of State, I believe.
Alan Dulles was
Alan was CIA.
guy.
But I don't know exactly, like, I'd have to brush up on, like, when exactly AIPAC was created and when they gained all their influence. But one way or the other, they ended up getting American support, and I don't think that's been good for anyone involved, including Israel. There's a weird thing, like, it's kind of like being on welfare isn't good for you, you know, if you're able-bodied and you can work. And it's kind of like there's this moral hazard that comes along with being, dependent on someone in perpetuity, but you don't learn to be your own. Like, no, the actual healthy thing would be like, hey, if you're going to create a nation here, then you gotta
know the repercussions of your actions.
Yeah, and you got to work out your own balance.
There's no repercussions when you're, you know, hanging with the boys.
And also, and this is one of the major problems in Ukraine too, is that when the biggest, baddest country in the history of the world, the United States of America, goes, we got your back, you end up getting a lot ballsier than you otherwise would be. You know, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go start a fight because my big brother will come bail me out. And it's like, no, you should actually only start a fight that you actually think you could win.
What do you think the resolution of that will be? Russia-Ukraine.
Oh, I mean, I think it's ultimately going to be essentially what the peace deal that was on the table at the very beginning that they made them squash, which is that Russia's going to keep parts of it. You know?
Russia keeps parts of it. NATO doesn't get in. Military-industrial complex makes billions of dollars. Everybody's happy.
So where we started.
Well, everybody except the Ukrainians.
Well, everybody's happy except the Ukrainians. But what's interesting is if they accept the deal, then the military-industrial complex doesn't make billions of dollars. So we got to stretch this out. So that, you know, they can cash in a little bit. It's interesting to look at. What's that?
No, can you ask on the Israel side, like, what's the? There's no solutions. I always say it's trade-offs. What's the short term and the medium term that you could think would be?
Well, so I'll do
what's going to be
long term first, almost is what I would do. Which is, again, it's like this similar thing with Ukraine. It's like what's frustrating about all of this is that it's kind of like, I'm not saying like every precise detail is known, but the broad strokes is obviously there. So look, the UN recommends 56% for the state of Israel. Okay, then they go to war. Israel wins the war. And they don't just take that 56%, they take 78% of the land, okay? Then in 1967, they go to war with Egypt and Jordan, they win again, and then they take 100% of the land. So the last 22% is really what we're talking about, which is Gaza and the West Bank. Every single peace deal that's ever been on the table, and I'm not saying what the craziest leader of Hamas yells on social media or something.
You're talking about
when they actually sat down in the Oslo Accords, at Camp David, at any of this, it was always about that last 22%, which that's what they mean when they say 67 borders, is they're like, okay, you get the 78%.
Oh, really?
Not the 56% that you were supposed to have in the beginning that we didn't even think was fair back then. Not the 78% that you get that, but give us our last 22%. That's the deal.
But on that, just going back to you saying they went to war, when you go 67, when you go 73, when there is a war that happens, it's like, why do we go Why do we get to go back to negotiating table after
To the
Israel
victor
won
goes spoils,
and say,
is his point.
all right, well, let's
Just-
sorry about that. Let's go back to this negotiating table.
I understand that perspective. Like yesterday's price is not today's price, 100%. But I think like according to international law, you cannot take more land due to war
you're
or
not.
conflict. I think that's what.
There's a lot of international laws. You're also not allowed to like. Do
But I
the
also get that
settlements.
sentiment.
No,
Like you
well,
keep,
look,
you know, we're occupying this land. You keep attacking us. All right, well then it's going to be ours. I get
it's like,
that feeling.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
sorry. Can you tell us the laws though that?
Well, okay, so there is it is I'm not an expert on international law, but it is the settlements are definitely illegal. You're not allowed to transfer your population into occupied territory, which they continue to do in the West Bank. And yes, I do think that Andrew's right that like you're not really allowed to seize land from a war. I mean, this idea is like this is the old order, the old order. The whole reason why we have international law is that no, you can't just go win a war and then say your land is ours. But the problem beyond that is that it's not like Israel conquered Gaza and made it part of Israel, or conquered the West Bank and made it part of Israel. They're just conquering it and holding the people there forever.
Right.
Like and this is just, it's an unsustainable system. And nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but I'm not saying, and whenever any of these real negotiations were happening, it's not the claim is like you all have to go back to Europe or you all have to go live somewhere else. That's obviously a non-starter. All this from the river to the sea stuff is not helpful at all. But I do think the obvious thing is that look, you got 5 million Palestinians living in this land. They have to get to have something. And it shouldn't be Israel's decision even. Like, why do you decide whether they get to have their own government or they get to, it's like they should have their
Let's say that
independence.
there is a agreement reached, right? And it's they get the 22%. It's back to whatever, what was 67 borders or okay, 67 borders, whatever that is. How does Israel protect itself from another version of Hamas coming in and saying, "Hey, you know what? We don't want those. We don't want that agreement. Actually, we want 46%. Actually,
River to
we
the
want
sea.
55%. Yeah, we want river to the sea." What are they supposed to do if they just relinquish total power in a vacuum? What would happen?
So this is I always love this quote, which I think I always butcher, but there's a quote from Thomas Jefferson where he's talking about slavery, and he said, "We have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither afford to hold on to it nor to safely let it go." And essentially what the big concern is like, okay, these abolitionists are saying slavery is wrong, but I mean, if we just release these slaves, they're going to come kill us. We've been enslaving these people forever. We've done horrible things to them. Like, if we let them go now, they're going to all come kill us. And you can understand where, that was a concern at the time. And it's, somewhat reasonable one. But in hindsight, if you look at it with the moral clarity from 2000,
you should have done it
can't
immediately.
enslave people. I don't know. That's just not an option. So you just can't. So if that were to happen,
saying they have to assume the risk.
well, yes, I'm saying that if Israel were to give Palestinian independence and then the Palestinians attacked Israel, we'd be having a different conversation at that point. But the fear of that is not enough to justify keeping people
And what would that conversation be, do you think?
Well, I mean, look, the other thing about this I'll just say is that there's a lot of reason to think that wouldn't be the case. And that, look, when there were peace negotiations going on, there was a lot of support behind the Palestinian Authority. And when the peace negotiations collapsed, Hamas's support went through the roof. And it's almost like the more desperate people are, the more they're like, oh, let's go blow something up.
Yeah.
Whereas if they
Great
think there's
point.
actually hope and there's actually a chance for prosperity and a better life, they're much more likely to not engage in that. Now, I'm not saying that's a guarantee. If I were Israel, I wouldn't disarm tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Right.
Israel's got a pretty badass military. It is still hard to believe that they allowed October 7th to happen in the way they did.
For a lot of this
I'm not speculating
discourse,
about
yeah.
anything. I don't really have any solid evidence on any of that, but it's if you know anything about Israel and how much of a fortress it is and how prepared they are, it's the wait time just makes no sense. It's a tiny country. But they could pretty easily just not let that happen again and have solid border security. But that would be, I think ultimately that
and it
has
would be
to be
easy to
Border
engender
security
US
was
support.
besides that, and I won't even speak on the West Bank side, that's a complicated thing. And the hard right has always said, like, if there was a two-state, it's Gaza. It's not also the West Bank. But you have Gaza, thousands of rockets for years. So what's the border security? Like, do you believe that had there been just real peace, at least from Gaza, over years and years and years, the way that, they took away all the permits for all the workers that would come daily, do you believe that Israel would try to be, quote unquote, enslaving them? Or do you think, hey, build it up, let the money come in properly, not go into Hamas's, the kids, the billions of dollars? Like, I truly believe the same way we made a deal with the Abraham Accords, and within 1 year, 1 million Israelis went to the Emirates. Like, they were dying to create business, to spend their money. Like, I truly believe that if just not West Bank, I'm talking Gaza, if there was peace, there would have been that exact same sentiment. And I think that that's what Israelis are like.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of, look, I mean, Israel wasn't occupying, or if you don't like the word occupying, wasn't dominating any of those countries. And so the idea that you're going to, like, I mean, first of all, just the point you made about the money not going right into Hamas's coffers, to be clear, Israel won't let sugar or potatoes or all types of humanitarian aid into Gaza, but they would facilitate cash payments to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars directly to Hamas, because actually was the big secret, that Benjamin Netanyahu was intentionally keeping Hamas in power in Gaza. But I don't think the standard can be, we're going to dominate you and keep you in grinding poverty, and then with impunity, whenever we want to, go on these like bombing campaigns. I'm talking pre-October 7th. Like, this has just been the status quo in Gaza. And you got to stop firing your rockets back at us. And as soon as you start acting peaceful, then we will tell you that we will allow you.
Which order did that happen in? If Brooklyn is firing rockets into Manhattan for years and years, like, they're going to respond. I don't think that there were bombing campaigns without.
But now we're getting into chicken or the egg.
For sure. But
and in order to do that, we have to go back to 1920.
But we keep going back, and I'm like, what's the next?
Well, listen, I grant you that it's hard to say when you go with each one of these things, you go, well, which was a response to which, right? But if I'm just being honest here, you go, this was a response to that, which was a response to that, which was a response to that, which was a response to a bunch of Eastern Europeans moving to a land they didn't inhabit and kicking hundreds of thousands of the people there out. Like, that's really what the first thing that this is a response to. And it's just kind of hard to get away from that. Now, again, I'm not saying that means Jews are going away anytime soon. It's just like, look, the Native Americans, like, that problem here, right, is like solved pretty much. But if we were talking back about, like,
the old fashioned.
Yes, yeah, sure. But I'm just saying, if we went back to, like, well, look, were there instances where Native Americans attacked, you know what I mean, like settlers, and then they were responding? Right. Sure, but what was the first thing? The first thing was us coming over here.
For sure.
And so now, if to the degree that there are still Native Americans around,
you could make the argument that there were always Jews there. Even though these Eastern European Jews came, there were Jews that were Sephardic
there was always a small population. Yeah, and part of the reason why...
and there were no Americans here when the natives were here. That's why I think it's a little different.
Fair enough. But look, the Jews there also did, pre-Zionism, live in relative harmony with the Arabs. I mean, it's one of the reasons...
I've heard back and forths on this. I've heard, like, and I know everybody uses their own arguments, but, like, there's going to be a skirmish. Does that skirmish, and maybe that's too reductive, define the entirety of the relationship? If there's 100 years of peace and then this horrible thing happens, does that mean it was horrible the whole time? I don't know. But I've heard both arguments.
The early Zionists even said it was part of the reason why they wanted to make their homeland in Palestine.
Because it was so welcoming.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd say so welcoming, but relatively speaking, the Ottomans and the Arabs had been better friends to the Jews than the Europeans had been. That was really where they dealt with the brunt of their oppression.
So maybe the argument shouldn't be that they had this, like, amazing relationship. Maybe the argument is it's better than them white people were treating us.
Basically, everything is compared to what?
Yes, that's better. I think that's more digestible, because I've been kind of told there's this I've been told, and maybe it's propaganda, that, like, I've probably even regurgitated it, during the Ottoman Empire, the Jews flourished with the Ottomans, and they were best friends. I'm like, oh, it must have been hard.
See, I was saying pre-Zionism because during the
Yes.
Ottoman Empire this is kind of, I mean, it depends on what point during the Ottoman Empire you're talking about.
I mean, there's a
because I think that it's like 400
500
years
year
or something.
period, yeah.
So it's more like the problems, at least from my understanding of this, the problems got worse and worse as kind of like the Zionist experiment got more and more aggressive. And there were a lot of mistakes made along the way. There's one figure in Zionism who I find is my favorite, was Chaim Weizmann, who was like, did you know who that is? So he was like kind of the godfather of Zionism for a little bit there.
Before
like,
Herzl?
No, after Herzl, but like before Ben Gurion,
Yeah.
So he was almost supposed to be David Ben Gurion, who ultimately became the first prime minister of, he was like ahead of him in position. And he's been, I know it was, yep, that's him. That's that Jew.
That's Colonel Sanders. He makes chicken. I think.
Well, he went on to make some very tasty chicken. Of course, he changed his name by that point. But so he was, I know it was Darryl Cooper who did this amazing podcast series. It's basically a book on tape, but it's like the best, man, it's like 30 hours long or something like that. But if you really want to understand like the history of the conflict, it's the best thing to listen to. It's just brilliant guy. But he said that he calls him the last humanist Zionist. But so Chaim Weizmann's whole theory was that like, look, if this is going to work, there's only one way it's going to work, which is that we have to like just smother these Arabs with kindness. And we got to bring all this investment in and make their lives so much better than their lives were before we got here. And that's the only way that we're actually going to have like a meaningful, sustainable homeland where we're not at war with our neighbors. And this was swallowed by the Zionists for a while. And it was really after World War II when like Ben Gurion and all these other guys, Menachem Begin and these guys were like, no, you're living in like you could almost hear it from an American perspective. Yeah. They'd go, you're living in a pre-Holocaust world. Like is it the same way they'd say pre-9/11 world? Like it was almost like, yeah. That was all nice and good before. But like these guys just tried to exterminate us. So now we're gonna take what's ours and we're gonna do it by any means necessary. If we got to embrace terrorism to kick the British out. And you could see, you're talking like 1946, 1947. Well, look, America just dropped 2 nukes on Japanese cities. Yeah. We just burned Germany to the ground. Who the hell? And they just got Holocausted. Who the hell is anyone to tell us that we're not allowed to break a few eggs in order to make what we want to make? So, and by the way, like as a Jewish person, like I'm sympathetic to that. I understand that mentality. But at the same time, you could also go from the perspective of Palestinian Arabs. You're like, hey, we didn't do that. Yeah. Like that wasn't us. Like we're like, why are we paying the price for what like some Europeans did to you? Like, hey, carve up a part of Germany and give it to them if that's what happened. Like, why are we the ones?
These people didn't try to exterminate us. Those people tried to exterminate us.
Right. So there's, it's just like the tragedy of history. Like on every sitcom ever where they would like tease the couple that's supposed to get together. Like this was our childhood was always like, Ross and Rachel, they're about to get together and then, she got the wrong message. And now now it's 2 more years until they get, it's always like, you guys were right here and just to make this work. And so I just think the whole thing could have gone a lot better. But for us to be a country thousands of miles away, to not be like, listen, if your family member was killed on October 7th, I'm not going to sit there and talk to someone and be like, you really shouldn't be leveling Gaza right now. Because I know if my family was killed on that, I think especially like you got a kid now, man, it's like when you have kids, you kind of like, you understand a different level of that. I mean, you could always understand like your friend or like your parents or something like that. But you're like, I got 2 little kids. You're like, dude, if someone hurt one of my kids, just the levels of evil that I could sing to, it's really not very hard for me to get there. Like as soon as I start thinking about it, I'm like, kill anything that moves. Yeah. Kill anything. And so I totally understand that.
Makes you understand human behavior way better.
But this was
the worst versions of it.
So, what originally woke me up, got me really interested in politics was Ron Paul's presidential campaign in 2008. And this was the point that he made. I don't know if you've ever seen this video. It was Ron Paul versus Rudy Giuliani. And it was in George W. Bush's Republican Party. If you're like, for younger people, I know there's a lot of younger people who listen to this show. And I think like, I don't know if you could fully appreciate what the culture of America was like post 9/11 when George W. Bush was president. And the whole tone of it was like, it's like, look, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. By the way, the reason they hate us is because we're free. That's their beef with us, is that we're free. So what can you do with that? You really can't do nothing.
And they're going to hear from us real soon.
And so we're going to explode them all to death, because what the hell else can you do with that? And Ron Paul got up and he was like, look, they don't hate us because we're free. They hate us because we're over there. That's why they're coming over here. Right. And so there was this thing where it's almost like it reminded you how, like, these aren't his words, they're my words, but like, it's like, okay, so you know how 9/11 happened? And then immediately we were all like, we're going to go kill you guys. It's like, yeah, that's how they feel too. That's like exactly how they feel. And so I do think there's something where it's like,
both sides.
Right. So the same way that if you're an Israeli after October 7th, you're like, burn this whole thing to the ground. It's like, yeah, but I think that's also the mentality of all those people. And then weirdly, they'll sit there and they'll be like, well, of course we have to burn all of Gaza to the ground. Did you see the videos of them cheering after October 7th? And you're like, yeah, but I think they're kind of doing the same thing you're doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, do you see Nikki Haley went over there and she's signing bombs?
This bitch.
What a, so like, you're like, yo, how fucking sick and twisted is that? That's like the darkest thing I've ever seen in my. And then the same people who will see that go, and did you see they were greeting the people on October 7th like they were heroes when they came back? And you're like, that is also pretty sick and twisted. All of this is pretty sick and twisted. I think you guys actually have a lot in common. Being honest. A startling similarity.
Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, we hear this name nonstop.
Pretty sure he's a Jew.
But who is he? Do you think that he's net negative, net positive for Israel?
Oh,
like what is
unbelievable net negative.
And then so what is he inspired by? What is he motivated by? Is this, personal interest? Does he have like a group that is pushing him in a certain direction? Like, I'm so removed from it. I don't even know what to think about this person. So maybe like a little.
But he's a member of the Likud party.
Isn't this a recent thing though that he's a member of Likud? Didn't he have to like partner up? No.
He's a member of Likud, but then they've partnered with people who are like a clique to the right of the Likud party.
So
essentially, it's a parliamentary system, so they need as many
of these.
Right.
So they'll go wherever they can.
And in this kind of somewhat ironic and tragic thing, so like when before October 7th, he had huge protests against him out in the streets because they were trying to like crack down on the power of their Supreme Court to give him more power, essentially.
Like 30 weeks in a row. And then October 7th brought everyone together.
They're against Netanyahu.
Netanyahu
and
for
so,
30 weeks.
And so now, if you could imagine, right, in this parliamentary system, all the liberals are furious at him. But now, what does that have the effect of politically for Netanyahu? Then the only alliance left for him is everyone to the right. So he's now got to cater to these extreme right groups, even far to the right of the Likud. And so anyway, the Likud party was founded by Menachem Begin, who was one of the terrorists before the creation of Israel, and a brutal one at that. And anyone can go look this up. This isn't like a pejorative. Like this is they said in their own words that they were embracing terrorism. But anyway, so the Netanyahu doctrine, as it's been described, was essentially, as you talked about the Abraham Accords earlier. So when I was a kid, Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister of Israel, and he embarked on what are known as the Oslo Accords, the peace process. And essentially, I mean, the Israelis had committed back in the 70s. Okay, so the 70s they had a meeting at Camp David, and Israel vaguely, if you could think 1967, they took over Gaza and the West Bank. By the 70s, the U.S. was kind of like, listen, we're going to give you in perpetuity billions of dollars every year. We're also going to give Egypt billions of dollars every year. This was basically like, we're going to bribe you guys to not go to war anymore, okay? So you guys make a freaking deal because you've been to war 4 times in 25 years or whatever it was. So it's like, okay, you got to stop. Yeah. And then it was kind of thrown in there and by the way, you got to eventually give the Palestinians a state. You can't just rule them forever. And they kind of agreed to that. So in the 90s, this was supposed to be, oh, they're finally doing it. And, Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat and Bill Clinton took pictures together and did all.
And these were good faith negotiations, or both sides were.
It's politics, so it's
It got close.
I could paint a rosier picture of it than is actually the case, but at least certainly much better than the place that we're at right now.
But I hear both sides were not operating in good faith, meaning
there's probably truth to that too. So like there was all types of stuff from both sides, and there were all types of political pressures. And so like one of the very real political pressures, and I've heard this story about, so when Arafat went back after initially, it may have been initially signing, or it may have been one of the subsequent meetings, but Palestinians were throwing their keys. And they had their old keys from their homes in wherever these Palestinian villages that are now part of Israel. Like you sold us out, because they're hanging on to some dream that they're going to take back over the whole thing, which is like just never going to happen. And so there's political pressure on him there. Yeah. And then there was also some political pressure on Yitzhak Rabin, like there was that right-wing Israeli who murdered him.
Yeah, that seems like pressure.
So there was also some of that pressure on him.
Wow, so both sides, there are factions of the people that are not happy.
There are the right-wingers of respectively of either side, right? Because even Hamas are the right-wingers within, Gaza. They're the hardcore ones. So the Yitzhak Rabin, loosely speaking, and this is somewhat rose-colored glasses looking back at it. But it was kind of traditionally what the view was that, look, you have to make peace with the Palestinians, otherwise you're never going to make peace with the broader Arab world. That was the traditional thinking, okay? And because the beef with the rest of the Arab world was over the Palestinians, right? And all of them essentially refused to recognize Israel because they didn't recognize Israel having control. Either they didn't recognize them at all, or they didn't recognize them having control of Gaza and the West Bank. And essentially what the Netanyahu doctrine was he was like, no, I can flip this thing. And the Abraham Accords were really like a culmination of the Netanyahu doctrine. He goes, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go work out deals with the surrounding Arab countries so that I never have to work out a deal with the Palestinians. And then Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, had the brilliant idea that, hey, we got a whole lot of money. We could just bribe the shit out of all these countries and give them new fighter jets for you and a little money package for you. And as long as you, and it kind of worked until October 7th, where you go like, oh, all right, yeah. It worked in the sense that you let the Palestinians know that your case, because the only hope for the Palestinians ever has been like, maybe the rest of the Arab countries are coming at some point.
Again.
And then when you see them make all these deals, it's like, nope, you will be subjugated forever. You now live in hopelessness.
More desperate.
And that culminated in October 7th.
Oh, shit. You've created a desperation. That would be even more supportive.
No one's looking out for
of a terror group. Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. So Kushner's getting all this credit, like he's actually pushed these countries closer.
I remember arguing
when in reality, he's created that type of...
we need Hamas
I remember
at least to fight for us.
I was getting in a big argument with Tim Pool about this, was it like a couple years ago, who I love Tim Pool, but we got in a big argument about this where he was like, I don't know, Dave, you're all about peace. You got to like Donald Trump. I mean, the Abraham Accords, all these peace deals. And I'm like, which one of those countries were at war? None of them were at war with each other.
Yeah.
The UAE and Israel weren't fighting a war, and then he went over and worked out a peace deal. He bribed both of them with my money.
Have you seen an F-35 take off? Stall a minute.
Honestly,
we're giving them fifth-gen fighters.
This is the best counter argument I've heard. So, they are pretty bad.
That is really interesting. I never looked at it like that. I think that, again, I'm such like a casual when it comes to these things, but I figured that like Jared Kushner's efforts out there were universally accepted as like his finest achievement. Like he was kind of looked at as this kind of he was kind of positioned almost by Trump like this like bumbling idiot son-in-law. And then when people look back and reflected on what happened with the Abraham Accords, they were like, well, no, this is fantastic what just happened. But it does create a sentiment, you can imagine, within the Palestinian people that there is no hope. And no hope can lead you to support a terrorist organization.
Because the thing is, if you're if
Let me
you're
tell
just
you
a casual though, like it seems so like that on the surface.
Yeah.
Because you go, I don't know, the Arabs and Jews have always been fighting, and then here we went over and
Now
did a
it
big
looks
deal
like
with the
they're
Arabs
picking
and
it,
the
they're
Jews.
partying,
Yeah,
yeah.
that seems totally good.
We
unless
did
you really
shows
think
in the
about
Middle East,
But
yeah.
what were they fighting over? And what was that? Was that situation ever actually resolved? Oh no, this was just papered over by all of this.
I'm going to tell you how we solve this. Okay,
go.
First of all, Dave's people, the Ashkenazis, have caused all this problem.
It is.
The Jews are separating.
If we make more agreements with all of the Arab countries, remember, Israel is 55% Sephardic. They're Arabs. We love it. Moroccans haven't met Israeli Moroccans yet. Once they go over, people will be like, love these guys. Then we bring them all together, push the Ashkenazis out. Actually, no, we need your brains. We need your stupid brains.
Damn. They can work remote. They can do remote.
I have a question.
I'll be
though,
honest,
like,
this plan is the most Ashkenazi thing I've ever heard. So I'm pretty impressed.
They're rubbing off on us.
All right, guys, we got to take a break real quick so I can tell you about Cook Unity. It's a meal delivery service, but the meals are actually prepared by award-winning professional chefs. Not some shit-ass meal that gets delivered to your door every week. I'm talking about award-winning meals. Every meal is prepared in small batches to ensure the highest level of quality. They're not making millions of these. Small batches, so it's high quality. It's crafted in a culinary sense. There are hundreds of weekly menu items from dozens of global cuisines, so you never run out of options. They got a matcha cookie or something. I'm a fat fuck. It's fantastic. I don't remember what it is. Brown butter matcha or something like that. It's amazing. It's legitimately good food, and Cook Unity's app offers a seamless experience to make ordering and planning your meals as pain-free as it can possibly be. All right, Cook Unity is the only meal delivery service without compromise. It means you get quality, variety, convenience, and top-tier culinary craft for as little as $6 per meal. To sign up, all you got to do is visit cookunity.com, simply pick a plan, and then select your meals from their menu, and let their renowned chefs do the cooking for you. And Cook Unity is offering Flagrant listeners 50% off their first order and 10% off their next 3 weeks when they sign up at cookunity.com/flagrant. That's COOKUNITY.com/flagrant. Now let's get back to the shizzo.
But I do have a question. Like, every time we do talk about the past and going back, say first, like all the people that don't know this story, like we're 40, we've heard this over, we know the layers. Now you're talking.
I know nothing. Actually.
But a lot of people like Gen Z are hearing this and then coupling that with like from the river to the sea, and then all the people that are like, wait a second, is that like a war cry? So they don't believe we should have this. Now we're defending our current right. Not mine. I'm not Israeli, but like, what would an Israeli? How do they act with that? Like, wait, do I have to prove that I just fight now? I guess because that's a war cry that you're saying like you want me gone. What are they supposed to do?
Well, I mean,
not Americans, but like
look, like the tragedy is like really the last 9 months, because it's like nobody wants to ever hear this ever, because it's like you just like kind of sound like a pussy or whatever, so it's like that you get dismissed immediately. But look, after 9/11, there was like, people forget how much we had the world on our side for like this brief little moment. They had candlelight vigils in Tehran about 9/11, and like, I mean, I know like, they're Shiites and Al-Qaeda's Sunnis, so there's a little something there, but like also part of it was just like, people see that and they're like, oh dude, this is horrible. Like and if you could imagine if George W. Bush had done what they did, say, for the special ops missions in Afghanistan and take out the Al-Qaeda bases, and if they had trapped Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora when they could have, and they allowed him to slip out so they could pursue this terror war and get their war in Iraq that they wanted. Yeah, it's a real interesting little detail there. Wow. But like, let's say we had done it, and that was it. We just, okay, these guys hit us, we're taking out their bases, and then we went, hey, listen, okay, once you come here and kill our people, that's over the line and we have to go kill you. But there are grievances that were brought up here that are somewhat legitimate. And we have been unfair in our treatment to the Muslim world, And so what we're going to do is we're going to, step back on that. And we're going to, we had this powerful opportunity. So like all the things that the worst right-wing hawks complain about the Muslim world, there certainly are a lot of problems there. And then we could have shown that we really were the good guys and kind of like won over a lot of support there and really moved them in the right direction. And likewise, if after October 7th, listen, for the entire history of Israel, up until Netanyahu, they always handled the terrorism problem with targeted assassinations and special operations. They never treated it like a military problem. You can't just like one of the most densely populated areas in the world, we're just gonna level the place. I mean, this was the worst way to handle it. If they had just been like, listen, if they had said the people who were responsible for October 7th are going to be brought to justice, that is number one, non-negotiable. However, we do recognize that the status quo is unsustainable, and we want to move. We are starting a new peace negotiations in a good faith position. Any group of Palestinians who's here on the other side to negotiate, we're ready to sit down at the table. Like, they did have an opportunity to not turn world opinion against them. You know what I mean? And so, of course, now after the last 9 months, now it's tougher than ever to get back to a position like that. But it at least has to start with stopping this.
A hypothetical scenario. This is something I'm concerned about, but I think that was beautiful, and I agree with you. But I do have a concern. Let's say you go back to the borders. You say, "Hey, we are going to stop." You can use occupying, whatever word you want to use. We are going to completely remove ourselves. You guys are on your own. Imagine there's going to be some support from the Muslim world as well, maybe the United States of America. Blah blah blah. Doesn't matter. But the message goes out there, and it's essentially, but if there is one attack, we are going to respond in kind. Are there not nefarious actors in the Israeli government potentially that could stage, what is that called? A
false flag.
A false flag? Like, this is, I mean, Americans, we've done this.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't any other country do it? So it's, even if you have everybody operating in good faith, how can you even trust an attack that would come over? It's
a very good point.
It just feels helpless, all of it.
Well, that is a very good point, and I could see where it feels totally hopeless. But I would just say, again, you're right. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I would also say that, England and Ireland are right next to each other.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And
things are cool.
You still have to try.
No, you gotta try. There has to be the process.
I think that's right. Russia and Germany, or maybe that's not the best example right now, but France and Germany are right next to each other. And these countries where there would have been a time not that long ago where it would have been this is just never going to work. You're never going to get past this and get to peace. But they did. And so it's there's this guy, Gene Epstein, who's a really brilliant economist. And I remember he always said this, he called it his case for radical optimism. And he goes, if you were sitting around in 1845 and you're at the height of slavery, and you went, in the next 20 years, I think slavery is going to be abolished across the Western world. Anyone would have been you're out of your mind. The abolitionist parties got 1% of the vote. They were regularly lynched. It was there's no way we're getting rid of this institution, which has been here for all of human history. But within 20 years, it was gone. So even when things seem at their most hopeless, it's I don't know. But we also live in a world clearly we're living through some type of major revolutionary paradigm shifting moment right now. I think that's pretty obvious. Things are, but between just how much the corrupt nature of politics is being exposed, the decentralization in the flow of information, the rise of artificial intelligence. I'm not even claiming to understand what the implications of all of this are, but I don't know, maybe we could be radically optimistic that maybe something much better could come along.
Yeah.
Or we're all gonna die.
There's an interesting book on that, Factfulness. Have you heard of this book?
I don't think so.
This dude, Hans Rosling, he's a Norwegian dude. But basically, he charts.
No, I don't trust them.
He charts over the course of human history that things have progressively gotten better.
Yeah.
That there's more accessible drinking water, more people have access to transportation, there's less child mortality. So even as things improve, we also get a distorted view of how bad things are because the starkness between the goodness and the badness starts to actually come out.
I know you said you don't want to predict. But I'm going to ask you to do one. What do you think the ripple effect is of the sentiment in America seemingly turning? Whereas when I was growing up, you were just pro-Israel, no one questioned it. Then starting about 10 years ago, people started being whoa, what's actually going on over there? I don't know if I'm pro-Israel. I might be pro-Palestinian. And it seems like the majority of people are feeling that right now. What is the ripple effect of that, do you think?
It's a good question, man. That's a really good question. I mean, there's no doubt that that is right. And you know, I've done like a bunch of debates on this topic, and like I debated Dennis Prager, and I've debated like a bunch of these other guys, and it's almost like there's this weird, you see it where there's a real generational gap where like part of it is that younger people are just getting their information from different sources.
Yeah.
And they're not getting it from like the same old corporate media. So like the debate would almost start with Dennis Prager, you know, like just saying the stuff that you could have gotten away with, I'm sure, in the 90s.
But now
you're like saying it to me, and he's just like, you know, he goes, the conflict in the Middle East is that one side wants peace and the other side wants all the Jews dead. And I'm like, but that's not true. And he's like, oh, all right. Well, I didn't realize we were allowed to tell the other side of the story.
Yeah.
So I do think a lot of it is just that people are now coming into contact with other narratives and other stories. And some of those are oversimplified on the other side too, you know? And like, it's not that they're perfect, but I do think...
Sorry.
No, I do think there's people aren't going to buy... Look, even when it comes to our country, not just Israel, I mean, we're not like a blindly patriotic country in the way that we used to be.
It's interesting to see. It's really interesting to see. I also noticed that like the same thing that happened with, you know, corporate mainstream media, I think is happening with like YouTube journalism as well, where it's like at first there was this democratization of information and you were putting truth out there and speaking truth to power. And then the truth gets a little boring sometimes and the views go down.
Yeah.
So then you start chasing those views again. And how do you chase a view? Maybe you'll tell the truth about a specific narrative that's really clicky. Yeah. And it's almost like I'm watching what happened with CNN and Fox News and MSNBC. I'm like watching it happen on YouTube as well. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Dude. I mean, I'm sure you must have, you know, you hope that like we are kind of like at least like old enough and wise enough and we're not like, you know, I mean, you know, the three of us knew each other literally when we had nothing. When we were literally like, if someone offered you $50, you're like, I have to go do this thing because there's $50. And so what am I, insane?
What a dream,
Like, I mean, it was literally like at a time.
Brag about
like,
that. A weekday
but like, we'd be like in the East Village and someone would be like, if you walk to 135th Street right now, I will give you $50. And you're like, well, I guess that's, you know. But okay, so you're not in that situation anymore. So you try to kind of like rise above some of these incentives, but you feel it.
Yeah.
You feel the incentives when you're in this world where it's like, I know you guys could do podcasts about like the dumbest shit that would get huge numbers.
We actively push back against it. There are things that obviously we're curious in that are fun, like bringing in the Egyptologist guys over here.
Sure.
Dude,
Israel-Palestine, super fun.
Well, like, but I'm just saying like the dumb shit. Like
it's so easy to have like certain people that you're just not interested in, and it's just not fun. And you have to take I don't even look at it as a hit on views. You have to like maintain the integrity of your show.
Yeah.
I think you got to do it for your audience, but you also got to do it for you. You see people lose themselves. Their identity just becomes views. It doesn't become the whole reason why we started talking in the first place.
You said like every like Twitter account that's always like, what do you notice in this video?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah.
You're like, dude, you're not even saying anything. Like, what is this? Is just
and I
engagement
look.
for I know.
What am I supposed to notice?
You're like, what do you notice in this video? Like, nothing. It's just Taylor Swift walking on a stage. What am I supposed to see here? I don't see any of it.
What's that guy's name?
Like, is there a
Matt
demon
Wallace
somewhere?
Or something like that?
that guy.
Should I not even mention him? Is he like?
No, I don't know. I know.
I know that exact account.
Specific in mind. I was
he
just
does
like,
that.
see these things.
Real grifter.
But I remember one time, and I won't even say who this is, but it was just like one of like the dumbest like political commentator guys who's got a huge, you know, like.
Can you say it to us and we just bleep it?
He made a video of like a segment of me on Rogan. So like a video, like a segment, like trying to take apart my arguments. And it was all really, really stupid. And so then I did like a segment on my show, like responding to it and just dunking on him. And dude, it got like some of the most numbers of anything I've ever done. And it's almost like when you see it, you're like, I could just find the dumbest content creators and just take their thing apart and just get like, and there's like, all of the incentives are to like do that. But then you're like, but I don't want to be that guy.
Do you remember Red Eye?
Of course, yeah.
It was a really fun show for comics on Fox
Yes.
News. It was super late. And it was really fun. It was genuinely fun.
I would assume you did it.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
did a
you
whole
probably
bunch of times.
started killing it on that. That was I think
No, they
where
were the
people
first
started
TV show
recognizing
to book me.
And anyway, I remember going on and like I was so naive to all this. I like just trusted news. I mean, I was such like an innocent little fucking kid outside of like saying horrific jokes. I was like, the news is real, you know. And I remember going a few times and they were bringing us some story of like something happened on a college campus. And I remember I even said this out loud. I was like, wait, so is this just what we do? We like find like the most extreme like left wing thing and then we just like act like that's normally happening everywhere. And the rest of them looked at me like, is this guy a fucking idiot? Like,
That's our
the
entire business model. That is the whole thing.
I genuinely didn't get it.
Sir, you are sitting in a room in a building worth $300 million, and it's all paid for on that model that you just called out in front of everybody.
Oh, God.
Oh, you got to find that clip.
I bet you it's up there somewhere. And I'm just like, and I was like, oh, got it. That is the hack. That is the model.
Yeah.
That's when it stops being news. It stops being journalism.
Oh, I
It's
mean, but like Fox News was always, in a weird way, it almost became the thing you almost respect more because it's so transparent and obvious. But Fox News was always like, just like Sean Hannity comes over and he's like, the Democrats want to institute communism and take away football. You're like, what? And you're like, you know, there's some grandpa out there who's like, they what now? What are they doing? Like they're just the dumbest liberal thing. And then you and. So anyway, just to the point though, it's that like you just gotta, the only real answer is you kind of just gotta guard against that. Yeah. And even though these incentives exist, you always kind of gotta try
guard
to be
against
like,
for yourself.
Yeah, like let me not just do the thing that I don't want to become. Because you do watch a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of accounts out there that are just like.
And I'm going to give you, I don't know if you'll take it as a compliment. I mean, it's a very, very high compliment. I know you guys differ politically, but Jon Stewart to me, and I differ with him on a lot of politics stuff, but I think he's fucking incredible in that he is the smartest person in pretty much any room he walks into, and he does his best to be nuanced within his thoughts. And I feel like a huge problem since he left is there are a lot of not even reasonable, terrible facsimiles of him that just lean one way to try to give you. I feel like you are, again, a different version because you have different thoughts, but you are the guy to take that mantle.
Oh, well, thank you.
Because you'll
I
do the
appreciate
intellectual
that.
heavy lifting. I think that's what John did. And I think a lot of people that aren't willing to do that, you have to just take a party line because it's easier.
Yeah.
It is so much easier
You
to
got
just
to
write
talk every day.
every single day.
Oh,
and it's like, I don't want to read every single book. You'll fucking read the books.
I will read books. Yeah. But I do look. I think Jon
ones.
Stewart. Well, they're not boring.
No, I know you.
I can't read them if they're boring.
But okay, fair enough. But I guess what I'm saying
But
is
they're
like,
boring to me.
You're
Yeah.
gonna
my
look,
guy.
you're gonna look at an argument someone made and a reference from a book that they brought up, and I imagine you might buy that fucking book.
Yeah, I've done it several times, even when I hate the. Yeah, I've done that. There was one thing where I had to like buy this book from the Brookings Institute, which I really hate. I hated to send them money, but someone was claiming there's this book that like totally refutes my point. And then it wasn't until like 250 pages into the book that they addressed the thing I was saying, and then they didn't refute it at all. They just asserted. They were like, "That's not true," and I was like, "Did I just do all of this for absolutely nothing?"
And most
So yeah, that's my torture.
but most people won't do that.
Yeah,
And they want to outsource that. And I think that there are times like this where, especially with this specific situation, where people are terrified to kind of share an opinion because they don't know what that opinion will do on either side. And they gravitate towards people who are going to do that intellectual heavy lifting to figure things out and slice things thin enough where you can comfortably speak about an issue.
well, look, man, like because there's levels to all of this stuff, and so when it comes to like being like the most informed or like an expert on stuff, like I'm not that. Cause there's people with like levels of expertise above me, but I do think kind of to like your point, like Jon Stewart, particularly with his original version of The Daily Show, there was just. Again, it's like I feel like the bar is kind of low. I also feel like that's why I look impressive because the bar is just so low. But it's like there was a thoughtfulness there.
Yeah.
There was something to Jon Stewart where he kind of had a view that was like, okay, he's put some thought into this, and he actually had. And then it was like everyone after him, every version of that show
Just want to be
after
famous.
him,
They
it
just
was
want to be famous.
Let me say the talking point that the audience already wants to hear. And this also just happened with late night and by the way, it's not even a comment on these people's talent, because Stephen Colbert was like
Wildly talented.
enormously talented
Wildly.
on the Colbert Report.
Report, yeah.
And Kimmel was like hilarious back in the day. Is just that it's almost like the economy became just say the thing. Don't take any chances. Just say what you already know is going to get you. You know, it's like, listen, there's a $200 million check in this for you. If you just get out there, and how about your joke is the unvaccinated should die? Ain't that right? Okay. Back, you know, and it's I do think for anybody, it's just, even if you are just like a Democrat, and even if you kind of agree with them, it's sort of, you're like, this is no way to live.
Yeah.
Like, your artists aren't supposed to be genetic replicas of the last thing that everyone all day said today. This is terrible.
Yeah.
God, I hate that stuff. And also, like, for us, I just, like, when the three of us, like, first were coming up in stand-up, it was almost like before the rise of all that. And that was like the cool thing. It was like, no, everybody was like unique and different, and everybody was saying things that were like wild and offensive or this.
Yeah,
but
like, it wasn't mainstream yet.
But there was this beauty in the art form. It's like really what I fell in love with stand-up comedy over was that you could go kind of like, if you somehow could combine this like really wild thought, but then also hitting on something true that everyone kind of knew and felt, and then you could bring the whole room together in this moment, this involuntary moment where they all went, this guy got us. There's something so beautiful about that. And then even in stand-up, I mean, you know, I remember like really it was like after Trump got in, it was like in 2016, 2017, 2018, the rise of like the woke mindset in stand-up comedy was so bizarre to live
see, I felt it was happening before that, and I think Trump was maybe when it hit its zenith. But when Trump won, I was like, I think silver lining to however dark you think this cloud is, people are realizing that woke shit it's a wrap for it. The clock has started. It's gonna run out.
Yeah, maybe that's right. But it was like, but it was wild there. It was like at a fevered pitch for a while.
Dude, it was really funny.
Nausea. It makes so much sense. Like, stand-up is so hard. And so imagine if I just need to get a quick laugh. Yo,
Just say
Trump
the thing
sucks.
that everybody,
It's like, give it up to God. It's the same shit.
Well, you could get an applause break for nothing. You
Also,
know what
they're
I mean?
so terrified. The audience is in there, and they don't want to be ostracized by their friends or their coworkers, their communities. They're like, I'm just going to laugh at the things that I'm allowed to laugh with.
And then there's also the true believers within the crowd, where it was like we had empowered the person who kind of wanted to be offended to like, oh no, you're right. You're right to interrupt this whole show right now. Yeah,
You're a hero.
tell them. How dare that, person with his male privilege on stage or whatever say this about you.
I remember early in that time, right, when things were getting a little bit like sensitive. Naturally, I'm gravitating towards the thing that's a little bit more wrong, distasteful, defending a position that you really shouldn't defend and trying to find some like logical thread to make it all make sense. But it was so sensitive. I remember there were comics at the cellar who thought I was like big MAGA. And I was like, no, I'm just doing the thing that we've
been doing
to do. Remember like 4 years ago when we were just making crazy jokes? Yeah, I'm just doing that now. It's just crazy to defend that guy.
Right.
But they truly believed it. That's how sensitive, when even the comics were propagandized. That's what I'm trying to say.
Also,
audiences, I'm
you're
fine.
right.
Think whatever you want.
Well, it's also a certain type of comedian, and I know you were always this way. I was always this way. You were always this way, Akash. Like not every comic is like this, but would have that thing of being like, well, right away, like if everybody is like, if everybody is against Y, well, like, man, if I could be for Y and make the whole room laugh, like if I could do that and still win you all over, then that would be like the ultimate achievement in comedy right now.
And it's like,
well, it's the most fun.
It's naughty,
If you get them on that, it's the most fun. And so it was a weird time where like even you're like, this is what we've always been doing, man. And then all of a sudden, like it was like, no, that's illegal now. So and you're like,
we came here to agree tonight.
That's the one I think negative effect of Jon Stewart is he said things he believed and he made them funny and he was intelligent. But then a lot of comics I think were like, oh, well, that
is comedy. Yeah,
he was comedy, saying the things I believe.
Yeah, he was so influential in the way that he did comedy that maybe people thought, okay, I got to be right,
Well, it's kind of like, you know how how Doug Stanhope is like one of the greatest comedians to ever live?
Yes.
But every comedian inspired by Doug Stanhope
Sucks.
sucks balls.
Yeah,
like they're
dude.
just the worst.
It really is a testament to
it's
how great he is.
He's
Yeah.
so
He's-
great. It's
he's
no,
like-
you can't do that. He can.
Yeah.
But it's not, there is like this weird thing
Yeah.
where like, it's like, no, that guy's really good at it. You don't have the thing he has, which is
Yeah.
a 1 in a billion thing. And now you're just trying to be like, let me get up there and say something.
Yeah.
man. Like,
Yeah,
don't
it's
do
great
that.
because the honesty, and then people try to be honest the way that he's honest.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
you can't.
They don't have the
It has to be
chops.
honest the way you're honest.
Yeah.
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 They don't have the chop. They don't have the affect. They don't have the ideas. Like,
Yeah.
he's a truly brilliant guy that is so like pure in the way he does it. He makes you think that that's how you are with your friends.
Yeah.
And you are not.
Yeah. You're not-
Yeah.
You know what? He might not be. He has worked on that craft for fucking 40 years, and that's why it seems
And,
so
and
natural.
you're looking at him like, you know, whatever, 20 years into his career or whatever it was
Yeah.
at the time when he was inspiring people. It's like, that probably wasn't him 3 years in
Yeah.
either. You know,
Yes.
like he
Yeah.
was probably
Yes.
just figuring out how to tell a joke
Yeah.
and stuff,
Yeah.
but you're trying to jump right to that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else going on in the world?
Are you-
Dave? I know we have limited
Are
time.
you voting in
Yeah.
November? Do you vote?
That's a great question. I meant to ask.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk Trump Harris.
I know.
Okay.
You don't have to say who, but I'm just curious. Do you,
No, I mean, I would tell you if I was going to. I mean, like, I don't know. I just probably not. I don't really believe in voting
I
for
was gonna say,
president.
I don't
I'm not.
think you
I'm not a
would, yeah.
big. Well, I mean, I think if you're, let's just say it takes you an hour or two of your day to go vote. If you're taking an hour or two of your day to do anything that you have a 1 in 140 millionth of a say in, if it was anything, I would look at you and be like, isn't there something better you could do with your time? Like, that's crazy. Like that's just literally, we would not do that in anything else in our lives. It's kind of, I think, this ritual of the religion of
Feels like a
the
social
government
responsibility.
Well, yeah. I would say-
I also just don't like, if I were to vote, it would be some type of protest vote. Like, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter. I mean, I live in New Jersey. It's gonna go for Harris.
That's my issue.
There's no real I also just, you know, I really feel like the Democrats deserve to lose this
Yeah.
election for several reasons. I think, I mean, look, the biggest things that I say of the Biden-Harris administration were like the first big project was, we're going to get this vaccine in as many people as possible, no matter what we have to do to get it in them, force, whatever we have to do. And the whole thing was sold off of lies. The thing didn't work the way they said it would work, and most people didn't need it. Then it was, we're all in on funding the war in Ukraine, which I think is like the most reckless policy in modern American history. And then they just totally weaponized the justice system against their political opponent. And like, if that doesn't mean you deserve to lose, then I don't know what would. And then I see Trump. And I'm just like, I don't, you know. So it's on the other day, like, I'm literally coming off of him. I'm like, these Democrats have to lose in order for this country to survive. And then Trump's up there and he's like, full immunity for cops. You know, and you're like, what? Like, what type of plan is that? He didn't even say qualified immunity, because I don't even think he knows the difference
He
between the
said
two. But he just goes full immunity.
So they
Like,
can just kill
do
anybody
whatever
they
they
want,
want.
that's
Like
right.
that. But it just, and I just, I just hate the campaign he's running.
Okay, help us understand the last few weeks.
Okay.
Biden steps down. Well,
Kind of.
Do we have a little?
Oh, I mean, that was a straight up coup. They
Okay.
just totally stole this, you know, and
we're being a little hyperbolic here, I imagine.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how
Straight up
hyperbolic we're being.
straight up coup.
It's like a metaphor.
No, I mean, well, look, let's just look at it like the facts as
I
we
love
have
it.
it.
He's
Okay.
about to win this.
Well, I'm just, again, tell me where I'm wrong.
I
okay?
read a little something on this,
So
yeah.
Joe Biden has been obviously in severe cognitive decline for many years
Yeah.
now. The entire media is like in Emperor's New Clothes mode.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're not allowed. The week before the debate, the new propaganda term that was rolled out was cheap fakes. I don't know if you guys remember, it was the shortest lived propaganda campaign ever. It only lasted a few days.
fakes?
They were called, cheap, you know, it sounds like deep fakes. But you see, there's all these cheap fake videos online. Now, cheap fakes are different than deep fakes in that they're real. But they're out of context. So people are putting out these videos that make it seem like Joe Biden's in severe cognitive decline. But this is all right-wing disinformation.
Got it.
But so this is what every corporate news outlet was saying the week leading up to the debate. Then the debate happens. It goes so catastrophically bad that they have to do this crazy 180-degree turn.
At least he told the truth.
Yeah, right. It's like they're struggling with how do we grapple with which was like, I mean, the debate performance itself was like, it's like, yeah, how did you guys let it get to this point?
Yeah.
You pretended that it wasn't a problem until literally it's not even just like a grandpa out of a nursing home. It was like the guy who's really not doing good within that nursing home.
Yeah.
Like your average nursing home, in take patient is doing better than this guy.
Yeah.
There will never be a worse debate ever.
By far. In the history of televised presidential debates, it was by far the worst appearance. Nothing even comes close. Right after the debate, the entire media has to turn on him, and they're like, someone else has to come get him. He said he's going to go. He goes to Camp David, and he has a meeting with all his inner circle. It's like Jill Biden and Hunter Biden and his closest advisors, and they all go there.
Hunter's
and
advice is probably the best.
Yeah, the Hunters. You can do it. So this thing's going to turn around, bro. So by tomorrow we're going to be up by 20 points. I got a 10-point plan. You follow these 10 points. But anyway, so they go there. So he decides. He comes out. He goes, no, I'm running. You know, I beat this guy in 2020. I'll beat him again this year. That's my legacy. I'm going to beat Donald Trump twice. I'm running. It's just not working. They send him out on a series of like interviews and things like he blows every single one of them, every last one. And it was just terrible because now it was like, the story, The Emperor's New Clothes or whatever. This was after. Now someone's already yelled out, he's naked. And so now there's a microscope on it. Yeah. So every little these things that were happening for years, but when he came out there and he's like, hey, my vice president Donald Trump has been all over the country. And you're like, your vice president Donald Trump? Like,
or when he introduces Putin, Zelensky's like...
he called Zelensky Putin. Oh, Jesus. So it was really bad. But he's still like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have a meeting with him where they're strong-arming him. They're like, we're withholding $90 million from your campaign because you have to step down and step aside. He says, no, I'm not leaving, okay? Then, according to Cy Hirsch, who's a real legit reporter on this, and I think he's right about this, Barack Obama comes in, goes, listen, we got Kamala Harris on board, I got the entire donor class, and I got the congressional leaders on board. You are out. We are invoking the 25th Amendment and removing you from office if you don't voluntarily drop out of the race. And Joe Biden says no.
Oh, wow.
The day that letter came out was a Sunday. That Sunday, on the Sunday news shows, you can go watch Face the Nation and Meet the Press from the Sunday the letter comes out. Biden's surrogates are on the news going, why are we still talking about this? He's made his decision. He won the primary. This is the democratic process. It's his choice if he wants to run and he's running. It's Trump versus Biden. Get used to it. Those are your two options. Who do you want to be president? Mere hours later, the sitting president of the United States of America, a few weeks out from convention, announces that he's not, after telling you, yes, I'm doing it, announces he's not. And he doesn't do this with an address to the nation.
Yeah.
He does it with a letter on personal stationery with his signature that does not seem to match other Joe Biden signatures. That's like, whatever. Forget even the signature
Way
thing.
less squiggly.
But like, it's like, that is such a weird way to do it.
Yeah, I thought
and then
that was peculiar.
It's on Twitter. That is so bizarre. And then we don't hear from Joe Biden for another 3 or 4 days. And so all I'm saying is if you look at all the information, it seems like what happened is that their next move was to just put that out. And literally before Joe Biden is seen from again, the funds are already being transferred over to Kamala Harris. The move, I think it was presented to him as a fait accompli, as the French say, that it's like, this is done. You've already been removed. What are you going to do now? You're going to go back out there? And look, they could just say, if he went back out there and went, I never wrote that letter, they'll be like, well, we'll say you did. Yeah. And you forgot. Because who's going to really believe you anymore at this point? And so it's like, and I'm sure, my guess is they had all types of other I mean, his son's in a legit legal has legit legal
So they're
problems.
holding other things.
I'm sure there's all types of other things that they had on him where it's like, hey, how do you want to play this here? Do you want your son to go to prison for the rest of his life and your legacy is totally destroyed? Or do you want to be, and as soon as he stepped down, the corporate media went right back to the greatest president ever, a selfless decision that he made for the good of his country. He would step down, and now we're into this new propaganda campaign, which is that Kamala Harris is a cultural phenomenon.
Okay.
We're all supposed to believe that.
That sounds like a straight up coup. Now that you put it that way.
Yeah, you might be right about the coup. So help me understand the Harris phenomenon, right? Because I think she's universally accepted to be a kind of like a bumbling idiot about 3 weeks ago. And then that immediately transitions to this undying love. And even if it was a corporate propaganda push, it has transferred to the public effectively, meaning they're convinced. Like if you ask audiences in the city if they're excited about Kamala, they will cheer. And if you ask them why, they will not say a word.
Dude, you know what's crazy?
So how does that happen?
You know what's crazy? As of a week ago, I think a week and a half ago, you go to KamalaHarris.com, her website, there are no policies on her website. Yeah. I don't know about now, but it was just donate, buy merch. Comics have more information on their website than Kamala Harris for president.
That's probably pretty smart of her. Like,
take the time to figure out what all your policy is going to be, because she didn't know she was going to be running a month ago.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, look,
you expect her to have a whole presidential plan for the country? Overnight? Not overnight.
You're the vice president.
No, because then you throw any of those things up.
But
then now
part of your job description,
down.
Al, if the president gets assassinated, you're in charge.
Yeah.
So you don't have any you have no plan.
Yeah.
Joe Biden croaks, he's 90 years old.
I mean, when the president's Joe Biden, don't tell me this hadn't crossed the line.
But if she would have put that up beforehand and be like,
no,
oh
but
shit,
I mean,
is she
look,
trying to push him the fuck out of
it?
here?
I'm talking about weeks later.
I think the answer is just that policy isn't their strength, and so why even get into that? Those crowds that you're talking about, I mean, look, the truth is that the Democrats haven't, since Obama, had anyone who's like an animating figure. Like what's motivating those people is that they hate Donald Trump.
Exactly.
And there's a tremendous sense of relief because they had this crazy liability of a senile guy, and now that's gone.
They're embarrassed.
And,
I think they actually were quiet. Like all these people that are Harris supporters were anti-Trumpers that felt embarrassed supporting Biden.
Yeah.
Because support for Biden, I think, was, I mean, he was a huge liability for the country. Yeah. Like you would put the country in a potentially dangerous situation by vocalizing your support for this guy who's definitely senile.
And also just the pretending that you don't see it.
Exactly. So you feel fraudulent, right?
Yes.
And the second there was another option, they fucking jump on it.
Right.
Which makes sense. But to see that now turn into enthusiasm is...
Well, I think the enthusiasm is more like, oh shit, we might have a chance to win.
I
think
that's part of it. I think also, look, there's a reason why Kamala Harris was picked to be vice president, and it's like the progressive DNA gets really into historic firsts. There's something about that. Look, this is why Joe Biden picked her, because if it's Joe Biden, it's just, hey, okay, we're going to reject Donald Trump and in favor of the establishment. And the guy who's been in politics for 50 years. It's like, but if you could attach to that the first vice president who's a woman of color, then okay, all right, we got a little something that we're working with here. And so now they're rolling this out. I think she's benefiting from the contrast between, the bar was like, she can walk and read words off a teleprompter. That's where the bar was at. She can do both of those things.
And we're
she knows she just got off of this plane, and so she's not going to try to walk back up the stairs onto this plane.
Don't walk up the stairs.
Because she knows she's not going to kiss
She can tackle stairs. Same numbers.
She's really excellent at walking upstairs.
Yeah, she's black.
It's anyway. So they've kind of, so there's a little bit of that, but then there's also, I do think that liberals, much more so than Trump supporters, they do kind of respond still to the corporate media signals.
Yeah.
And so if you just start telling them all day long, this is exciting,
Then
they're
they'll
excited
believe it.
about this, they start to. I also think there's been a tremendous, so I have, this is totally anecdotal, I don't know what this means, but I've gotten like 30 text messages at this point about donating to Kamala
it's
Harris,
nonstop.
about different,
yeah.
and I've like, I don't donate to. One time I've donated to Tulsi Gabbard when she was running. It's the only Democrat I've ever donated to, and it's just like, oh, and so there's a lot of astroturfing of like making, and all that money that they were withholding from Joe Biden, they pumped right into Kamala Harris's campaign, and so there's this attempt to build her up. I think a lot of it's an illusion. There's still going to be several more hurdles for her that she has to debate Donald Trump at least one time. She's going to have to sit down for tough interviews. Kamala Harris has this thing where she can read a teleprompter speech with no problem.
Yeah.
Like you give her a teleprompter speech, she'll read it. When she's asked tough questions, she seems like she just took like a 600 milligram edible, like just kicked in,
Yeah.
and she starts going into this like space is above us and around us, you know,
Yeah.
which is like I don't understand it exactly. Maybe she's very nervous or something. I don't get why she goes into that.
Yeah.
But well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really trust that elections are free and fair ever. I've never trusted way before Donald Trump ever started saying that. I never trusted elections, so I don't know. But it does seem like, okay, they're going with her. There was a reason why everyone was assuming it wouldn't be her, even if Biden dropped out.
Because nobody believed.
Yeah.
Okay, so now there's support. Now explain Trump. Trump is at all-time high. He gets shot. I mean, immediately the day after, I'm like, just hand him the election.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
over. There's no way that they could make up this kind of ground. He's a hero.
Yeah.
He did it in this prolific fashion. He's got his fists in the air. Fight, fight, fight. It's almost like that happened 30 years ago. Nobody is even talking about this anymore. Like, his campaign seems to like lack energy. Like, what the fuck is happening in Trump land?
Something really changed in Donald Trump since he took that bullet. And I don't know if you guys notice it, but to me, it's very clear. I mean, it's like first off, at his convention speech, he was like totally affected by it, which, you know, understandable. But look, there's an obvious blueprint here for Donald Trump that Donald Trump would always follow. And he's not following it right now.
What is that blueprint?
Well, look, I mean, what did he say about Russiagate? It was a witch hunt.
Oh,
They
yeah,
were
yeah.
out to get me, right?
Yeah.
What did he say about all the criminal charges against him?
Witch hunt.
It's a witch hunt. They were weaponizing the Justice Department against me. And if he wanted to keep this story in the media and make this the story of the whole thing, he could just say what. I mean, look.
Everybody thinks the CIA tried to
They
kill me.
allowed. Listen, after framing me for treason and then weaponizing the justice system against me, the Secret Service just happened to allow someone with a sniper rifle to get within 130 yards of me and get a clear shot at my head. This guy who's, you can see on video, is scoping out the area for an hour plus beforehand while people on the ground are screaming, he's got a rifle on that roof, and they didn't yank the president off the stage. Donald Trump always stokes conspiracy beliefs. He always does this. He could easily just be poking this thing
First thing-
and make this the biggest story and totally make this, like, this is what Trump always had the ability to do. He decides what's going to be in the news cycle today. It's his superpower, you know? And he is very clearly not doing that. Dude, Elon Musk asked him the other day on their Spaces about it. Then he just started praising the Secret Service for what a great
That
job
was the first
they did.
thing he did. He said the Secret Service is amazing. What an amazing job.
So my conclusion, Trump shook.
So basically, Trump's going, wow, they tried to take me out. And by they, that means the CIA or the alphabet agencies, the powers that be. And now he's like, holy shit, it is that easy to take me out. I barely survived this one. They will try it again. I better toe the company line. I better behave.
Listen, I think that seems to be the only explanation that makes sense to me.
Holy
And I think
shit.
Donald Trump, look, when he ran in 2016, he said, it was like, I'm going to drain the swamp. And that was like but the thing is, when you're talking about draining the swamp, you're talking about rolling back the biggest honeypot in the history of the world. I mean, like, you're just drain the swamp. Like,
That's gonna piss a lot of people off,
Yeah,
maybe.
like if you want to actually, Tucker Carlson said this, but like I think he's dead right about it. If you really wanted to drain the swamp, you have to be ready to die. You know, like you have to be ready to sacrifice your life
I actually
for that
fear
mission.
for Vivek if he wins.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I don't think Donald Trump was ever ready to die for this. You know, I think Donald Trump was like, the way his mind works is like, I'm tremendous. I'm very smart. These other people are very stupid. I see the obvious solution to this. You know, like he would always just be like, you know, it's kind of just like, yeah, we shouldn't fight stupid wars. It's bad business, you know, so let's not do that anymore. I don't think he had any clue what he was actually up against. And I think that probably, a bullet whizzing by your head and being like, yo, their plan was actually to blow your brains out on national television. That might make you think, ooh, I don't know if I want to piss them off. Also, the Secret Service are still responsible for his security, you know, going forward. And so my takeaway is just like looking at it, having observed Trump over all these years, I'm like, oh, for the first time, he seems really shook. Like he seems like, he's worried about that. I don't think he wants to die.
I would even say even before that, because first time he was running on, I'm going to drain the swamp. He gets elected. There was no drainage of any swamp. I think immediately once he got elected, he got talking to in a way where it's like, oh, he knows what he can and cannot do.
He even bailed out Hillary. Did you hear him talk about Hillary? He's like, we could have done horrible things to her, but I think we should move on. And
like this is my point. She's just going.
You didn't hear this?
Yeah.
Say what it is.
Well, they were like, there were all these, campaign promises of lock her up, but you didn't end up locking her up. And basically, his response was basically just like, we said things on the campaign, but how about we're all just nice to each other? No one's going to lock anyone up.
It doesn't look good to do that.
Come on.
You lock up a president's wife, a secretary of state. That doesn't look good for America.
Yeah, it's like, wow, look at the energy shift in that. It's
so
like,
is he running now, despite all of this, just to free his criminal record? Like
he could free his criminal record by stepping down.
Yeah,
I think that's a negotiation.
So
away.
then why is he putting himself through this for the third time?
Now they need a patsy.
Well, I think
too deep, probably.
I think Donald Trump is motivated by what Donald Trump is obviously motivated by. I mean, a guy who's like, well, it's not just power. It's like
attention.
It's like identity. Like, he's the guy who has to build a huge skyscraper and put his name in gold letters on it. Like, and the fact that he was a one-term president, I think, really bothers him. The fact that the narrative is he lost. He has to constantly correct that anytime anyone thinks it. And I think he wants to come back and win again. But I don't know what exactly he wants after this assassination attempt. And I don't know, I think he wants to win still, but he also kind of wants to signal that it's like, hey, come on, man. Like, all right, drain the swamp. Well, all right, I was talking about drain the swamp. Let's just make the swamp a little better than the swamp.
Here's a question I wanted to ask you. Robbie Slovik, who you probably know, another very smart political comic. I really trust him. Throughout the election cycle, I've been asking him, what do you think Trump's chances are? He's like, Trump has no chance. He even said after the bullet was whizzed by his ear, he goes, people are going to forget this. Trump has no chance. The only time he was worried was the debate. He's like, Biden's in such bad decline, I don't know. But people aren't going to vote for Trump who are in the middle. They're just not anymore. But Donald Trump has hijacked the Republican Party. So let's say he loses this election, gets bold again, and is like, you know what, fuck it, I want to run again in 2028. What are Republicans going to do? Like, how do they get their party back?
I mean, I think he's just too old at that point. I mean, Donald Trump is going to be 84.
No.
What is he?
Oh, wait, you're saying next election?
You're saying if he was running 28.
Yeah, that's too much.
I don't think it's possible that he's going to run again there. I don't agree with Robbie on that. I mean, I think that certainly if it was Trump versus Joe Biden, I think if there were real elections, I think no question Donald Trump was going to win that. Look, Donald Trump was down pretty big in the polls against Hillary Clinton and ended up winning. He was down substantially more in the polls than he ended up, he did better than he was polling in 2020. That's how Trump always is. He always does a little bit better than he's polling. He was even up in the polls in every single swing state against Joe Biden. Now it's kind of returned back to where Trump typically is, which is like the polls say he's going to lose, but there's a lot of closeted Trump voters out there. I think what Robbie's probably underestimating is that like there's real, the inflation is really killing people, dude, and the immigration is really unpopular. And I think that like really, really hurts the Democrats. Now, that being said, I'm more on the conspiratorial side, where I'm like, all the signals that I've seen so far is that the powers that be will not allow Donald Trump to be in the White House again.
Not
so
even
if you were
with
saying,
his capitulation?
I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that could be a game changer. But I will say that all the signals for the last 4 years have been that all the most powerful people are telling you this guy will not be allowed to be in the White House again. And those people have a lot of power. You bet against the CIA, you usually don't win.
Do you think some mail-in ballots or something worse?
I mean, what have we seen already? I mean, I don't know what the next step above this is. But I certainly think that like it is, listen, whatever, man. I don't want to say anything that could get anyone's channel in trouble. So I'll just say like in hypothetical.
Say it and we'll cut it.
Okay, so in hypothetical.
Or do you want us to cut it, or are you just gonna?
No, you can
okay.
I'll try to say it in the best. Let's just say like I was reading this novel the other day.
There we go.
Yeah.
About this crazy corrupt country that totally changed the way they did elections on the year that the guy that they didn't want to win was up for re-election. And it just seems a little bit suspicious, you know?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. Yeah, you guys decide. I don't know what the latest YouTube rules or whatever for this are. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. But I don't know anything, but I definitely have my suspicions about what they would do. And I don't think it would be that hard for them to do that.
My question was going to be, how accurate do you think Trump was in 2020 saying rigged, stolen, blah, blah, blah?
Okay, so I'll say it like this, right? So I've read a lot about like U.S. sponsored colored revolutions, you know, which is like where they're basically like these CIA operations, and they've done them in like Serbia, and Ukraine, and what they'll do is basically everything they did in 2020. Yeah. It's almost like down to a T. Like everything from like though they get protests in the streets, which remarkably they are able to control in a way that is like really wild to me. But it is amazing how like that whole BLM protest thing, it's amazing how quickly the Democrats could turn that off. As soon as Joe Biden's back in there, it's like, whoop, that's off. You're not on the streets anymore. Nope. And in the middle of COVID, when they were telling everyone to stay inside, they just sent all the signals out. You're allowed to go out now if you're doing this protest thing. There was big money people who were bailing out the worst of the rioters. Like these people would be getting arrested nightly, and they'd be raising money to like bail them out. I believe Kamala Harris even donated to one of these organizations. Double check me on that if I'm right on that. But regardless, then there was like the media campaigns against the guy, the lockdowns being prolonged even way past when it was obviously like unnecessary and not mitigating the virus. I think a lot of that was kind of to tank the economy. There was mass censorship in 2020 of pro-Trump influencers, just anything, just getting kicked off. And then they totally overhauled the way we do voting with no real mechanism to like verify that these cards were coming from the right places. And so I don't know, looking at all of that, after Trump lost, I could understand why any one of his supporters would be like, this was not fair, especially after they had framed him for treason. And the whole Russiagate thing was completely made up, dude. It was all based off lies. Yeah. The total deep state, like, psy-op is not true at all. It was totally laughable that Donald Trump was in a conspiracy with the Russians. Just bullshit. Yeah. And so now, Donald Trump, in Trumpian fashion, had no idea how to wield power or how to combat this, so he just bitched and moaned about it, and then he sent his lawyers out to like be like, we have proof, and then every time they went to court, they just got thrown out of court because they had nothing. They had nothing other than what I just said. Like, like it was just like being there, like no fair. This whole thing is no fair, and the judge would be like, around here we need evidence. You know what I mean? Like you can't just come into court and go no fair. But looking at all that stuff, you're like, I mean, it's clearly like, a
lot of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, and you could just look at it and be like, look, they're clearly like kind of setting this whole thing. How far did that actually go? I have no idea. I'm not going to say anything about any of those voting companies. I don't have that money to pay those lawsuits. But I also don't know. I'm not trying to say anything more than I know, but I'm like, you could look at this and be like, it does seem like it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And the weird thing, like with all the stuff we were talking about, like the way Donald Trump, which has always been one of the most fascinating things about him to me, is the way he triggers left-wing people, like the reaction that he gets out of them is so enraging that it's like blinding them to anything else. So I've never really liked Donald Trump. He's never been my style. I don't like that. Just a million things about him I don't like. But I was never so enraged by him that I couldn't be like, oh, this is a kind of fascinating moment right here. Like, this guy's running against the system and winning. And so it was almost like a lot of those left-wing people, they were just like, oh, I hate Donald Trump. They were like, well, he's a Russian agent. They're like, that's right, he's a Russian agent. You know, they'll just jump on whatever the anti-Trump narrative is, they'll jump on it. And then you'll be like, hey, you know, that was the CIA who told you that. And you know, left-wing guy, you're not supposed to like the CIA. Since when do you like the CIA? Like, there's just no more even critical thinking. So it's like, you don't have to like Donald Trump to look at this and go like, it does seem like there's something going on here. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and some of these guys who it's almost like they are trying, like they have a startup oligarchy. Like they're just like, hey, listen,
technocrats.
This oligarchy has failed us so much that like we have to start our own oligarchy.
Who are these guys? The tech guys?
Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, these guys. And I generally do kind of go like, well, I mean, the current oligarchy is really failing the country. So like maybe these guys would be better. I mean, they're certainly not like principled libertarians or something like, they're not me, you know what I mean? Like they're willing to get CIA contracts or do whatever it is. It's like, I think my read on it is kind of like, I think these guys, first off, they're brilliant. They're very successful. And I think they see the current trajectory as a real long-term problem. And that they're kind of like, listen, like this is going to be really bad for business ultimately. Like if we keep going in this direction, this whole thing's going to collapse. And then we can't do what we're doing right now, which is making billions of dollars.
Bad for their business, right? Not U.S. business.
Sure. Well, I mean, maybe, I don't know, to the extent that it overlaps, maybe both. I don't really know. But it does seem like there's no question that like Elon Musk, you know, I tend to kind of take him at his word that he wanted Twitter to be more of a free speech place to some degree. I think he believes that to some degree, but there does seem to be a dynamic there where it's like, I do also think he wanted to kind of let the pro-Trump people back on to Twitter. And that was kind of like, you know, a big part of, you know, if you're going to let the people who have been kicked off, well, who is that? It's mostly the pro-Trump people who have been kicked off. Not exclusively, but I don't know. There's an interesting force there where they are really behind Trump now, especially with J.D. Vance, who's Peter Thiel's guy.
Why did Elon back off of the $35 million a month that he said he was going to give Trump?
Oh, I wasn't even. I heard someone say something about that, but I don't know. I don't know that.
He's like, I'm going to go. And then he just backed off of that.
I didn't hear that he backed off.
Yeah, he backed off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like,
well, someone probably crunched his numbers. They were like, you know, you spent a lot of money on this platform. Really, another $35 a month.
So I was a big Elon Musk fan. Now I find it all a little bit disingenuous to buying Twitter for free speech. I don't care if you let pro-Trump people on, but I'm a little annoyed when all your tweets are suddenly pro-Trump, and it's like, do you want free speech or do you want your guy to win because it benefits you? And that's fine. Just don't present yourself as some fucking guy putting on my cape and I'm letting you guys speak.
Well, maybe the argument would be that he thinks his guy can only win if there's free speech, but that free speech is still the principle. You know what I mean? Like those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I do. Look, I do think that I don't know what's in his heart or what is his brain that works differently than all of our brains do.
Yeah.
But I think what he exposed with the Twitter files was pretty wild.
Yeah.
It was a service to the American people that we know that.
Yeah.
And that it is kind of like, you know, it's obviously a little bit of a gray area, but you know, if the idea of the First Amendment was that like in the public square, you can go make whatever argument you want to make, and if people want to listen to you, they can. Well, like the public square is outdated. The public square is social media now. And so if you're saying that you could be out there making arguments, which in many cases people were making correct arguments, like about lockdowns and vaccines and how they were not what they were sold as. And the government could come in and put pressure on these companies to like silence you. To me, like that's the most terrifying thing, because like I was saying earlier, like that's the whole prospect for like, oh, maybe we could actually save this whole thing, is because they've lost their grip on control. So like if you have that, then it's almost like the First Amendment is meaningless at that point, because if the government can control that, you're screwed. So I'm sure he's a flawed, person, but to the extent that he's rolled that back a little bit, I'm pretty grateful for that. I'll say personally, I at least feel, I felt like through 2020, 2021, 2022, I felt like constantly I was navigating through this like fear that I was going to get shut down.
Yeah.
And I had to constantly be like, all right, man, like, how do I say this in the way that's best going to not be? I mean, I can't tell you how many tweets, like back before Elon Musk took it over, where I like wrote it and then went, delete it, dude. Like, what am I doing? Am I going to risk everything over because I want to say this one thing? And like, even just getting people like me to make that calculation constantly, like it's a real chilling effect. And I don't feel that way as much anymore. So maybe that's just my feeling about it. I don't know if that's right.
I think it's probably a net positive, and I do think the free speech is important. I just don't necessarily trust his intentions as he presented them.
Yeah, no, you might be right about that. And also, look, he has kicked people off still. And there are people who still aren't left back on, which is almost like a weird thing, because he'll say constantly, he does kind of contradict himself. Yes. He'll say, hey, look, as long as you haven't done anything illegal, then you're allowed to say it on X because we're for free speech. But then Kanye tweets like a swastika flag or something, and he bans him. And you're like, all right, well, which one is it? You know, like, I mean, I don't know. Either you believe in this or you don't. So he certainly hasn't been like 100% of what he said, but I think it's probably better.
Yeah.
And also, the thing with Kanye, it's like he was just trying to get kicked off anyway. I think he knew that was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we need an adjustment period for the fullest form of free speech. So I think like the knee-jerk reaction to what we're seeing on Twitter, even like this week, is like, what the fuck is going on? Maybe you can't let people just say whatever they want. But I think that is what happens when you give someone a sports car. They drive it as fast as they can go. And I think eventually it takes time, but the people that are consuming this stuff eventually start to weed it out. We go, this is just like...
It's a good analogy, man. You're like, listen, we're gonna crash that first car, all right? So we're gonna crash this first civilization.
That's
but if you give us a few...
Civilizations, we got this. But like, I think, again, it's not like you give us free speech and we're like, I'm gonna behave with all this freedom that you're giving me. I'm gonna go do some wild shit. It's spring break. We're in Mexico. Something's gonna happen. And then after maybe, 5 years, 10 years, a few different election cycles where you start to realize the same patterns happening, maybe people are less manipulated by them. I feel like right now it's we're consuming content like our parents respond to like Nigerian credit card scams. You know what I mean? Like I'm on the timeline like the Jews did what?
Right.
Like my parents are like, no, I just got to pay the tax and then I get 10 millions from this Nigerian print. Like I am that susceptible to information.
And it's great. I intentionally don't click on things so I don't introduce any of that to my algorithm. So it's like I almost have to buffer myself from certain news or from certain free speakers just so it doesn't like muddy up my timeline. And it sucks because I want to see it all, but then I don't want to see
exactly
that type of shit.
Did Ari ever tell you about the thing he did when he took charge of his algorithm or whatever? No. Like Ari, it's such an Ari thing, but he just like did this experiment where like he wouldn't click or search anything except puppy videos for like a month or something. And it was just all puppy videos, and he actually got it to where the algorithm was just showing him puppy videos, and that's all it was. And he was like, I was pretty happy for that month. It's like, good effect on me. But it is a weird thing too.
I don't believe that. I believe it would be like puppies dressed as Hitler, cut off puppy. It would be puppies, but it would be all the other shit that Ari likes. Well,
I know, dude, just from like doing such a deep dive on the war in Gaza and just like trying to keep up with the news about it constantly. At first, it's like it was after a while, like where I had to stop doing it on social media because it's like, oh, dude, I can't watch. Like, listen, I want to be up on what's happening, but I can't watch videos of babies dying every day. Like, what am I doing to my soul right now to just like be constantly seeing this?
Yeah.
So we all got to figure out how to navigate this. At least though, to your point though, it's like I think that like with Candace and with that space particular, the one thing I am like grateful to her, I've had so many people, coming at me for just being on there.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing, and this is what bugs me, is it's like, it's not even like the people coming at me are disagreeing with anything I said on there.
But the
They're
fact
just
that
like,
you're associated
how
with
could you
her?
be there
Yeah.
with this person? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't really do that guilt by association thing, man. Like, I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
And then also it's like, well, if you were going to play this game, then like, let's play it out. Like, who do you have on? And what have they supported? And what have they, and it's like, okay, like, yeah, like on the side that's critical of Israel, there are people who have said bad things about Jews. On the side that's pro-Israel, there's a lot of people who have said real bad things about Palestinians, and like, there's, okay, I can't not talk to anyone. I've talked to lots of people who are pro-Israel too.
Yeah.
But also, like, look, Candace does say over and over again, like maybe she's wrong on some of the conspiracies that she's talking about, but she does say over and over again that she has no problem with Jewish people and she doesn't hate Jewish people. She has lots of Jewish friends. She's always had lots of Jewish friends and I do appreciate that she's at least saying that. And the way I look at it is it's always like, oh yeah, you try to silence these people. It's like some Freudian thing. You repress something, it always kind of reemerges in an uglier fashion. And you're like, okay, you try to suppress this one, watch it reemerge as someone who's not saying that anymore. And now they're just like, no, like all of them. And
I think that's part of what got Trump elected.
Yeah, maybe. And like, so I think that the way it should be handled is like, if those guys are saying something that's so wrong and offensive, then it's like, all right, so like take them on and win the argument. If it's so wrong, it should be really easy to just destroy their whole thing. And I'm not saying like the marketplace of ideas is perfect, but it's better than the alternative.
Which is the restriction of all.
Yeah, just what it's dictated from top down, what is the truth and what isn't.
This is the price we got to pay for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you seen the people getting arrested in England and I think even in Canada for the things that they've said? I don't remember the exact details.
like
Facebook posts.
There's a guy recently
Yeah.
that just got arrested.
I don't know much more than that. Like I basically
But they don't have
read
freedom
that
of speech.
was happening.
And that's the thing. Like they have freedom of expression or whatever it is, but that's a bullshit way of saying you can't say what you want.
That's right.
Yeah, go express it. I am expressing with my words. Well, not that. You can't.
I think that's a really, really dangerous path to go down. Is that, and look, what happened in Canada. I know this is, you said the Trump assassination's 30 years ago, so this is like 500 years ago, but it isn't actually. It's only a couple years ago. That the way they cracked down on those trucker protests was really
taking their
insane.
credit cards and stuff,
seizing bank accounts, and then seizing the bank accounts of people who donated money to them.
Wow.
Like not even like you were out there or did anything, but you were just like, hey, I'm going to throw a few bucks to this cause.
Wow.
You're like, geez, this is freaking creepy. We don't want to go in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any countries you feel are doing it, like any countries or governments you feel that are doing it right, that America would be like, we should maybe model ourselves
Or the
after what they're
closest to
doing?
right.
Closest to right.
I'm a big fan of Liechtenstein. Really like what they're doing over there. Very low taxes. No, I don't know. I mean, it's, all of them have their own problems. I don't know that there's any country that the country that I model that I'd like us to be a lot more is the United States of America, like that's like what we were always kind of supposed to be. And what I think in many ways we did a better job of in the past. And there's obviously certain things we didn't do a good job of in the past. But I think that like, I'm 41 and I was born in a pre-war on terror America, like a pre-9/11 America. Remember all those rom-coms where they would always end with the guy running up to the plane?
Yeah.
You could run up to a plane. Like you could just go in the airport. Like we weren't all treated like terrorists and stuff. And we didn't have this like these crushing deficits and these endless wars and these like unprotected borders and all of this stuff. And I think we could just go back to being like more of a free country. I think like honestly to me, I think the Declaration of Independence is like the most amazing document that's ever been written in the history of the world. And like, that's our founding document. Let's try to live up to that. That's the example I'd like to follow.
Okay, last question. How did the Jews kill JFK?
Okay, so once you can control the weather, you say everything else.
Made it nice and
everything
sunny
else
that day.
Yeah, you got a magic bullet,
A little
really.
fog would have rolled in. He would have been.
No comment. But if you want to find out the answer, I'll be on a Spaces with Candace Owens.
What was she saying? And is that a real conspiracy? Or is this like just trope?
No, there's a real conspiracy that Israel was involved in the JFK assassination. Again, I do not. This is not a claim I'm making at all, but there is a conspiracy out there that I think there is evidence that the Israelis were attempting to blackmail Alan Dulles, as we said before. That would be the connection there. Alan Dulles was fired from the CIA by Jack Kennedy because he was furious at him because he was totally working against him. And it was a big thing. But JFK fired the head of the CIA, and supposedly, Bobby Kennedy told me this is true, that he said he's gonna crack the CIA into 1 million pieces. Like that he was basically like, I'm going to war with the CIA. I'm gonna like destroy this organization. And then he took a nice limo ride through Dallas. And then on the Warren Commission, which was to investigate what happened in the Kennedy assassination, they put Alan Dulles on the commission. Which is just like the biggest like signal of like, we'll be looking into this, you know? So I think the theory is extrapolated from, they had Alan Dulles blackmailed and therefore the Israelis. There were issues between David Ben-Gurion and John F. Kennedy. He was very upset at them over like nuclear testing or something. I don't know that conspiracy that well inside and out, but anyway, that's the theory. I never, look, again, with all this thing, I think the thing to keep in mind here, and then by the way, all the real hardcore like anti-Semites, this is where they'll say, see, this is why Dave's working for the Jews too, because he's just telling you to tone down the temperature or whatever. But even if the Israeli government was involved in that, it's like, governments do evil things. That's like all over the place. It doesn't mean you got to blame, Barry the dentist who lives up the block. Like, he didn't have anything to do with that, I promise you. And he does really good work.
He does.
But you're gonna pay. You're gonna pay for that work.
Dave Smith, ladies and gentlemen. Dave,
thank you, guys.
tell them about your show, where they can watch more of this. You just started going, 4 days a week now?
Yeah. I go 4 days a week. It's Part of the Problem is my podcast. It's available everywhere, but if you want to support the show, partoftheproblem.com is the place to do that. Plus, you get an extra episode that's only for members, and but it's up on YouTube and iTunes and all the other things. And then Comic Dave Smith on Twitter and comicdavesmith.com for all my road dates.
Let's go. Get out and go see him do stand-up. It's great stand-up as well. Thank you so much, Dave. You're the man.
Thank you, fellas.